April 12th, 2022 regular meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. I'd like to welcome everyone here this morning. Those of you who are watching online, watching on television. We have a good full agenda today, and we'll begin with adjustments to the agenda. Mr. Mokrahajski, do you see any adjustments needed to the agenda for today?
No, Chair, we don't have any.
Thank you. For the board, no adjustments. Then we'll move along to emergency business. Do we have any emergency business we need to attend?
We do not.
Thank you. Then directly into public comments, which is item 3 on the agenda. Before we get into public comments, I'll mention that we have no time certain this morning, but we do have prescribed lengths of time for each of the agenda items. We'll pay attention to that. Under public comments, I'd like to say that if you wish to submit written public comment, you can do so prior to the board meeting. If you can get it to the county administration building by Monday, we can usually include it in today's in the record for today. Otherwise, in public comments, you will have 3 minutes to speak. I'm not going to give you a warning if you're approaching the 3-minute line. Keep an eye on the clock. It'll count down from 3 minutes from the moment you're asked to speak. And at 3 minutes, the microphone will be silenced. I want to thank everybody for participating this morning. Ms. Jones, do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
One moment, Chair Farr. I do see at this time, if we will begin public comment. If you wish to present public comment during this time, please raise your virtual hand so I can see how many people we have wishing to speak versus how many people are just attending. Chair Farr, at this time, I'm watching hands go up. I have 10 hands raised at this time. Let me switch screens and get it flip on it. One moment.
And thank you for handling that queue, Ms. Jones, and I'll provide a thank you to each speaker.
Okay. At this time, I will call on Thomas Hirora, followed by Paige Hopkins. Thomas, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. I do show you're self-muted. There you go.
Well, hello. Thank you so much, Commissioners. It's a real pleasure to get to chat with you here. This is actually my first time giving a public comment at a Board of Commissioners meeting, though I've given many at 4J and at City of Eugene. I'm going to keep it fairly brief because I'm not used to being up at this hour. Secondly, the issue I want to speak on is something that might seem like it would fall in City of Eugene jurisdiction, but is actually what can be an overlooked part of the unincorporated county. So of course, I'm talking about a street in the River Road community, which is Lake Drive. It's home to Emerald Park and is the back door to Howard Elementary and my middle school alma mater, Kelly. I imagine you all know this road in Chair Farr's district. When I was in 6th grade, I was in Ms. Lynn Cooper's power walking class, and I know the routes she chose made a great effort to avoid that street because the northernmost windy tip of that road is especially precarious, narrow, kind of hard to traverse, especially for people like cyclists. And one thing that's come to my attention lately is just a culture of going 45 on Lake Drive. Seems that a lot of actors are doing it. It seems that selfish and irresponsible driving has sort of become the norm there. And as we're thinking about, places where the City of Eugene is amping up their sort of traffic enforcement on West 11th, my concern was there should be some, to the best of our ability, improved safety and regulations around speeding and just trying to change the culture on Lake Drive. It just seems that my whole life it's been an accident waiting to happen, it feels like, but it's an essential part of the River Road and North Eugene community. And, to an extent, Horn Lane also, for many, many years I've seen concerned neighbors putting up signs saying, please, don't go over 20. And so that whole area is just one of those areas I wanted to bring attention to. And I hope that you have a great meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Herrera.
Thank you for your public comment. One moment, my mouse is not working. Our next speaker will be Paige Hopkins. Paige, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Hi, County Commissioners. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify today. I'm Paige Hopkins, speaking as the Climate Justice Organizer for Beyond Toxics. I want to thank you for the work that you have done previously on the Lane County Climate Action Plan. We have highlighted 3 points we have made on the current plan being voted on this week. 1, we broadly support the current climate plan and hope that it will pass. The passing of phase 2 of the Lane County Climate Action Plan is a strong step forward in our goals for a more resilient and sustainable future for Lane County. 2, we support the Climate Advisory Committee's recommendations for additions to the plan. We hope that we can continue to make any additions or adaptations stronger in the future. And 3, after passing the plan, we suggest incorporating equity recommendations as further implementation tools and ongoing best management practices. As we move into the implementation phase, we need clear goals to measure the results of them. We suggest that you pass this plan and continue to add more actions as an ongoing process. We hope to continue working with you after the passage to ensure emission reductions and equitable distribution of co-benefits. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Hopkins.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker is Ann Nealand, followed by Barbara Kenny. Ann, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. Ann, I show you are muted. You are self-muted.
Good morning. My name is Ann Nealand, and I continue to wonder why this Board of Commissioners is satisfied with the reports from Lane County Public Health. Once again, on April 5th, the lead public health administrator, now Brian Johnson, says LCPH focuses primarily on vaccines to stop the spread of COVID in the county. Mr. Johnson reports that COVID, quote, is not spreading so rapidly because there are a large number of folks who have either recently had COVID or who are vaccinated against it, unquote. First, do the vaccines prevent transmission? A clear answer has been provided by both Anthony Fauci and Rochelle Walensky, who separately announced in January that the vaccines don't stop transmission of the virus. Second, concerning the effect of catching a virus on immunity, Anthony Fauci has said, quote, the most potent vaccination is getting infected yourself, unquote. So based on that, I guess when Mr. Johnson explained to the board that the spread of COVID in Lane County is reduced by both vaccinations and the people who've had COVID, his statement is half true, but misleading. Importantly, Commissioner Farr made an effort to suss out whether Mr. Johnson has any empirical evidence to support his statement that vaccinations diminish the spread of COVID. In response, Mr. Johnson admits that the vaccines, quote, the vaccine, quote, doesn't necessarily mean people will not get infected with COVID, unquote. And then for the second time, he offers his tricky explanation that the spread of COVID in Lane County is reduced by the combination of people getting vaccinated, not, and people who have been recently had COVID, truth. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you, Mr. Johnson. LCPH's overall COVID response is also shameful because it has failed to evolve from the ineffective vaccine-dominant approach at the pandemic's early days. Outspoken medical professionals like Dr. Peter McCullough have articulated that this country has failed to respond effectively because as people were given positive PCR tests, they were sent home with no protocols for at-home care, but rather simply allowed to get sick enough to require hospitalization. So why 2 years into this pandemic is LCPH stuck in the same narrow focus of pushing the ineffective vaccines? Where are the public health efforts to share prophylactic strategies to avoid illness, the treatment strategies to avoid hospitalization? Mr. Johnson has none to report except to repeat, quote, vaccination is our best strategy, unquote. Does this board want to ask why LCPH's COVID strategies haven't evolved beyond the failed strategies of the days when the death tolls and hospitalizations were at their highest? What authority is compelling LCPH to adhere to a failed vaccine-focused public health campaign? And why is this board complacent to accept this persistent failed strategy in our community? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nealand.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker will be Barbara Kenny, followed by Jacob True. Barbara, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, commissioners. My name's Dr. Barbara Kenny, and I'm a resident of East Lane County, and I live near Leesburg. I wanted to offer a quick follow-up to my comment last week where I asked about the Deadly Physical Force Planning Authority meeting that had occurred on March 14th. With help from Commissioner Trieger, I did receive information on where to find the meeting recording about that meeting. This meeting is not known as the Deadly Physical Force Planning Authority meeting, as one might expect. Rather, it's called the SB 111 meeting, and that's named after the 2007 Senate Bill 111 that created the Planning Authority. The March 14th meeting recording shows that the members did discuss some, but not all, of the recommendations in the independent OIR report into the officer shooting death of my child, Stacy Kenny. According to the discussion in the meeting, based on these recommendations, they did make some changes to the investigative protocols into the use of deadly force incidents that occur within Lane County. I think it's worth noting that these protocols had not been changed since the investigative plan was put into effect in 2008, which was 14 years ago. While I appreciate the progress that has been made, I do think my written comment submitted 2 weeks ago as part of public comments still contains relevant information and requests, and I would ask that you consider it as you have time. Also, I would like to thank Commissioners Buck and Trieger for speaking with me about this issue. Secondly, and completely unrelated, I wanted to offer my support for the work you're doing in responding to the serious issue of climate change. I was one of the ones evacuated during the Holiday Farm fire, and the fire burned directly across the street from my home. Thankfully, the wind had shifted at that point and blew the fire away from the homes on my street, and my immediate neighborhood was spared. I appreciate all the work that you have put into creating a climate action plan for Lane County, and I think it's the necessary and right thing to do. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Ms. Kenny.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker will be Jacob True, followed by Tony Ramos. Jacob, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
All right, thank you. My name is Jacob True, and I'm in the South Eugene, Southern Eugene district. That'd be Lori Trieger's district. I'd like to talk to you about the county's climate action plan. Broadly supported, but I wanted to say I broadly support it as it's currently written, but I was worried about the recent revisions to the county's draft climate action plan, particularly the removal of NGS1, which would make explicit the county's support for municipalities in its jurisdiction to electrify, and revisions to replace explicit references to electrification with broader industry-friendly language like decarbonization. I saw the advertisement the Northwest National put out in the newspaper, and a lot of it, struck me as pretty false. A lot of the folks who are renting, they don't get to have a choice about what they have, and if new construction in Eugene, which I realize is not the focus of the county, but I just wanted to point that out. I'd also like to echo the comments of Paige Hopkins regarding adding equity score to actions. I think that would be useful. And on a personal note, in our house over here in Eugene, we just had a heat pump put in, and the savings were evident right away. It handled the cold weather that we had, that snow that we had a little bit ago, just great, and it's saving us a pile of money. So electrification, I think, is the way to go. And I just wanted to give my perspective. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker will be Tony Ramos, followed by Lisa Colgan. Tony, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Good morning, Chair Farr and Commissioners. My name is Tony Ramos, and I am the Community and Government Affairs Manager for Northwest Natural, serving Lane, Lynn, and Benton counties. You may not know, but Northwest Natural is a publicly regulated utility with about 1,200 employees. More than half are represented by OPIU Local 11. We are regulated by the Oregon Public Utility Commission, various rules, regulations, and reporting requirements at the federal level. Thank you for this opportunity to comment on the Lane County Climate Action Plan. Recognizing this is a living document, we appreciate the additional time you provided to edit the last draft and provide more context and data for Lane County residents and businesses. We also appreciate the amount of work and robust discussions that county staff, community partners, and commissioners have been investing in this work. There is a lot in this climate action plan to be excited about, and Northwest Natural stands ready as a partner. We are again especially excited about the CAP's inclusion of renewable natural gas and renewable hydrogen. You will hear more from one of my colleagues, Chris Craker, on some of the many amazing innovations we're engaged in here in the state. With the electric and gas systems working together, we can meet climate goals and collaborate on Oregon innovation. We embrace the change that's needed and acknowledge climate change is real. We have submitted our comments in writing to each of you and submitted it to the public record as well. We outlined some additional changes that are needed to make the draft accurate and usable as a living document. Energy planning on its own is complex. Energy planning while pivoting toward carbon neutral visions we all share is increasingly complex, requiring more data-driven, iterative discussions. We believe that collaboration grounded in innovation is key to the carbon transition, and renewable natural gas is exactly the kind of innovation that both urban and rural parts of Lane County support. Again, we look forward to partnering on the implementation of this plan and appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker is Lisa Colgan, followed by Bethany Cotton. Lisa, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public testimony.
Thank you for, thank you, Commissioner. Yes, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners. This is my first, I think it's my second time that I've actually commented here at the Board of Commissioners. It's always a pleasure. I want to echo some of the other speakers in thanking you and thanking staff in particular for their great work on the Climate Action Plan and for really being a leader among the counties in Oregon who've taken the initiative and drawn up these sort of plans. Climate action really is more urgent than ever in light of the most recent IPCC report. I'm a resident of Cottage Grove and a member of both Elders Climate Action and also Climate Action Cottage Grove. And those organizations as well support this effort to deal with the climate emergency in the county. I would have three primary focuses to my comments. First of all, as others have recognized, this is a plan in progress, so it is going to be very important to keep it flexible in order to deal appropriately as the climate changes and other or additional measures may become necessary. Secondly, a plan is only as good as its enforcement. So I urge the county to be serious about enforcing the plan and making sure that it is in fact honestly implemented according to the desire of the drafters. And third, I would urge the staff and commissioners to reach out to cities who are attempting to draw up their own action plans, and especially to encourage those who aren't. And I'm thinking in particular of the city of Florence, which has a council which has steadfastly refused to declare a climate emergency or take any action whatsoever in recognition of the climate emergency, despite the fact that they are right on the coast and some of the most vulnerable areas in the state. So just briefly, thank you very much for your work. I hope you do pass the plan and be assured that you have support of many people out here in the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Colgan.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker is Bethany Cotton, followed by Chris Crocker. Bethany, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Good morning, commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm Bethany Cotton, resident of District 3. Born, raised, and educated in Oregon, I'm an environmental attorney and conservation director for Eugene-based Cascadia Wildlands. The latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report is profoundly dire, with the UN Secretary General stating we are sleepwalking to climate catastrophe. Inaction at the local, state, federal, and international levels is at the heart of the burgeoning epidemic of climate anxiety and grief. Oregon is feeling these impacts to our physical and mental health. Unprecedented wildfire and smoke emergencies, heat waves, April snowstorms, drought, and flooding. Thank you for your efforts thus far on the county's climate action plan. All too often, however, good plans are written, but nothing is actually done to implement these goals, a phenomenon known as an adaptation gap. We are suffering from such a gap at every level of government. I am disappointed by the recent proposed revisions to the draft plan, removing NG-S1 language, supporting grassroots efforts to electrify our communities. The replacement of this clear language with industry terminology, which attempts to deem continued fossil fuel use as renewable, does not serve the county's goals and would weaken the plan. Society has throughout history banned products found to pose excessive harm: lead in gas and paint, HCFCs, DDT, asbestos. Each time, industry pulled out all the stops, attacking scientists and healthcare professionals, cherry-picking data, and bearing their own damning studies, hiring lobbyists and feigning allyship, all to continue to profit off their toxic product. Each time, industry claimed the sky would fall without their product. Each time, it did not. Northwest Natural Gas Corporation is following this tired playbook, gaslighting its customers and local leaders while co-opting the rhetoric of choice. The company fails to disclose the science on frac gas industry's contribution to climate change, the terrible indoor air pollution health impacts of gas appliance use, which disproportionately impacts low-income and communities of color, while making demonstrably false claims about the capacity of the oxymoronically dubbed renewable natural gas to meet demand, and ignoring entirely that over half of Eugene residents are renters with no ability to choose healthier fuel sources. After 20 years of renting, I recently purchased my first home and am working to transition it off gas, along with lots of other work this old house needs. Doing so is very expensive and difficult, contrary to Northwest Natural Frac Gas Corporation's claims that everyone has choice in their fuel source. Please replace the NG-S1 language, support community-based efforts to address climate change, finalize the updated plan, and begin its implementation. Thank you for all of your efforts.
Thank you, Ms. Cotton.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next presenter is Chris Crocker, followed by Nick Anselmo. Chris, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. Chris, I show that you are self-muted. Chris, I'm still showing yourself muted, so I will go to Nicholas Anselmo. Oh, there you go. Chris, you've unmuted.
Great, thanks. Chair Farr, Commissioners, I'm Chris Craker, the Emerging Technology Program Manager at Northwest Natural. About 2 years ago, we formed our Renewable Resources team to lead our transition to renewable. We were excited to see information on renewable gases in your draft climate action plan. And as you consider the plan today, I want to provide useful updates. What is renewable natural gas, or RNG? As you know, anything organic that is rotting is producing methane. There's waste methane everywhere, just venting into the atmosphere at landfills, agricultural sites, and more. New technology allows us to affordably clean up this methane and put it to work in the existing gas pipeline, replacing fossil gas and reducing emissions. With permission from the legislature, Northwest Natural has already signed agreements with options to purchase or develop RNG, totaling 3% of Northwest Natural's Oregon sales, with plans to expand rapidly. For context, the US is at about 11% for wind and solar generation. For more context, the rest of the world is ahead of America. Denmark, for example, is already at 25% RNG, aiming at 100% in the 2030s. Over 325 RNG facilities are operating or under development today in North America. Lane County is home to 2 RNG projects with opportunity for more, thereby benefiting both the airshed and the regional economy. What is renewable hydrogen? Just like RNG, renewable hydrogen closes the loop on waste. That's because it comes from excess renewable electricity like wind and solar. Wind and solar are intermittent and generally need to be used at the time they're generated. They also need to be overbuilt to account for clouds and seasonal changes in the weather. When the sun and wind are in full effect, more power is generated than is required. So when you convert that excess electricity into renewable hydrogen through a process called electrolysis, it can be stored for months and then delivered through our pipeline to the pipeline system to provide energy when and where it's needed. There's quite a lot going on with hydrogen right now globally. HydroPloy in UK is blending about 20% renewable hydrogen gas. Europe, Australia, and parts of Asia are investing deeply in hydrogen technology. Hawaii Gas is at 12% hydrogen, And at Northwest Natural, we're conducting a 5% hydrogen test at our Sherwood facility. And we're also working with Bonneville Environmental Foundation and eWeb right here in Lane County to develop a proof of concept electrolysis project. I've sent in more links with our testimony, including a webinar if you're interested on the latest on these renewables. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Craker.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next presenter is Nicholas Anselmo, followed by David Eigel. Mr. Anselmo, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
I'd like to start out by addressing discrimination as a landlord, a homeowner, a resident in the River Road area. I'm not allowed to rent out and discriminate to renters based upon skin color, sexual orientation. I just wanted to reiterate that businesses do not have the right to do whatever they want. That being said, I would like to move on to the climate change issue. I would like to bring to the table the question of what happens when, due to climate change and our lowering water levels and our drought, what happens with electricity and electric production when our dams won't be able to produce the electricity required to serve the community. That being said, the idea of renewables or green energy is a farce. As a longtime subscriber to Beyond Toxics and Cascadia Wildlands, dams hurt the environment. They destroy ecosystems and they do all kinds of damage. Also, I'd like to bring attention to the proposed lithium mine that's going to be on Nevada-Oregon border that's going to destroy native tribal lands and destroy wildlife and habitat. None of these issues are brought up in the talk about climate change and environmentalism. Another thing is energy independence and or sustainability. What happens when we have storms, when people get cut off from electricity, like what happened several years ago with that ice storm, where my electric bill jumped 1 month all the way over $200, $300, because they had to replace all of the electric lines. I support choice. I support government working for the people to protect their rights and their right to choose. We should have the right to choose, and we should have a plethora of different energy sources. We should let the free market decide based upon what is efficient and what works economically and environmentally. When you put all of your energy source or all of your marbles in one basket, eggs in one basket on one energy source, you leave yourself vulnerable and you pollute excessively in one area of the environment, because each individual energy source has an environmental impact. Nothing is green, nothing is completely benign. There are some great technologies coming that geothermal and producing lithium at the same time. There's some proposals in Nevada to create lithium and electricity via geothermal, but still, that's only one technology and it's in the production. Look at Iceland. They have geothermal and they don't have enough electricity to supply their community. So now they have to go back and.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker is David Eigel, followed by Dennis Reynolds. Mr. Eigel, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your comment.
Thank you very much for the correct pronunciation of my name. One of the activities Lane County may engage in is to honor individuals through the naming of buildings, rooms, and other public remembrances. At a time when many are concerned about racial issues in our country, it is important to make the public aware of the rich tradition we have in this community of good-hearted, wise-headed proponents of racial equality, integration, and harmony by honoring such a person. With this in mind, I believe that it is especially important for Lane County to now honor an individual who is among the most worthy of honor to have ever been born and raised in Eugene, Oregon, the late Professor Frederick Dunn. Dunn was widely respected, even beloved for his brilliance, kindness, and extensive service to the broader community. Professor Dunn's passing in 1937 was mourned throughout Oregon. U of O President Valentine Boyer praised Dunn's personality and his enormous contribution to the U of O. The Register Guard reported his death as front page news, and an extensive editorial praised Dunn's character, academic accomplishments, and service to the community. Sadly, Dunn's reputation has been destroyed by the dishonest smear campaign conducted by the New Yorker U of O President Schill. Despite Schill's misrepresentations, Professor Dunn was not active with the local chapter of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan Fraternal Order, let alone its leader. Professor Dunn was a well-known proponent of racial equality, integration, and harmony. While Schill's Dunn report falsely stated that Dunn had not left a record of his views, nothing could be further from the truth. On one occasion, in an article in the local press, Dunn proudly described his being the descendant of abolitionists, including those who had committed and risked their lives for years by moving to Bleeding, Kansas as part of the Underground Railroad's efforts to free slaves. On another occasion, Dunn's humorous tale of how at age 3, he had played the role of Little Harry, the black slave child in a Eugene production of Uncle Tom's Cabin, was printed in the local press. Lane County is the primary funder of the Lane County Historical Society. The society, infected by what I call social justice warriors, has joined with other marketers of filth about Professor Dunn and the people of Oregon. As the funder, the commissioners are under an obligation to stop this misuse of public funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eigel. Ms. Jones, before we proceed, I'll mention that we are past the 10 speakers that are specified in the public comment section. We will extend beyond to accommodate all speakers who are signed up. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next presenter will be Dennis Reynolds, followed by Dylan Plummer. Dennis, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Farr and members of the Commission for the opportunity to speak today. I've lived in Lane County for most of my life. When I retired as currently live in South Eugene, when I retired as a university child care administrator, I left Lane County for a 10-year career as a Unitarian Universalist minister. I'm now mostly retired, but serve as an affiliate minister with the local Unitarian Universalist Church. The service that I do on behalf of my faith includes a membership on the City of Eugene Sustainability Commission, Eugene Springfield Earthkeepers. I also represent the latter on the NAACP Environmental and Climate Justice Committee and Fossil Free Eugene and Lane County Coalition. I wrote to you previously on behalf of Earthkeepers, which includes representation from a dozen congregations from different faith traditions. And I want to offer thanks to Commissioner Traeger for assuring that that testimony is part of your public record. I want to urge you not only to take action on approving the climate plan that is on your agenda, but continue to do more, including facilitating and encouraging more electrification by municipalities, recognizing it's not a matter of when Lane County needs to electrify, not an issue of if, but an issue of when. The reality of that need it becomes clear to all as we see the geopolitical impacts of Europe's over-reliance on gas. Let's make the when we transition now. The science is clear. What we do impacts the climate. In addition to the tending to the science, today I want to encourage you to listen to the voice within that calls you to live out your highest values. Last fall, in a joint statement, Pope Francis, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and the Patriarch of the Eastern Orthodox Church spoke out about climate change and its disproportionate impact on people in poverty and other frontline communities. I'd like to just share a bit of that statement with you today. They said, as leaders of our churches, we call on everyone, whatever their belief or worldview, to endeavor to listen to the cry of the earth and the people who are poor, to examine their behavior and pledge meaningful sacrifice for the sake of the earth. All of us, whoever we are, can play a part in changing our collective response to the unprecedented threat of climate change and environmental degradation. This is a critical moment. Our children's future and the future of our common home depend upon it. Thank you, through establishing an effective climate plan, for taking steps to do so for all the children and for our shared home. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker will be Dylan Plummer, followed by Max Wilbert. Dylan, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Hello, can you hear me? Great. Hello, County Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity to testify today. My name is Dylan Plummer, and I'm a senior campaign representative with the Sierra Club, working on building electrification across Oregon and Washington. I'm also a resident of Lane County in Commissioner Trieger's district. I'm testifying to echo comments we've already heard from our partners, including Paige with Beyond Toxics and Bethany with Cascadia Wildlands, to say that Sierra Club broadly supports the county's draft climate action plan as it stands and the passage of it. We do agree with the recommendations provided by the Climate Advisory Committee and the recommendations of Paige Hopkins regarding including an equity score with actions, but if that can be included after the passage. And specifically, we do have some concerns about the revisions that took place over the past few months in response to Northwest Natural, the state's largest fossil fuel companies lobbying, specifically watering down language regarding the need for electrification to instead refer to quote unquote decarbonization, and including references to renewable natural gas, which we know based on Oregon Department of Energy report can meet not even 1/5 of our state's current demand for gas. I want to just take a second to respond to some of Northwest Natural's recent actions, and just kind of highlighting this broad campaign that they are running against meaningful climate action in our community and across our state. And so I'll start with their recent litigation against the Oregon DEQ's climate protection plan, which they claim is not motivated by their, the strict restrictions it puts on their emissions, but obviously, their intention is to fight back against any kind of stringent recommendations that would hold them to their, very, very ambitious commitments regarding renewable natural gas and green hydrogen, which, as I mentioned above or earlier, is not viable in the quantities that they're discussing, according to research from our own Oregon Department of Energy. So with that, I want to say just how critical it is that we're passing this climate action plan, that we're including really explicit language about the need for electrification and the transition off of gas and fossil fuels broadly. And we're including our support for cities in the removed action NGS1. Specifically, I'm thinking about the city of Eugene that is, with the help of a grassroots effort, making steps to be the first city in Oregon and one of many.
Thank you, Mr. Plummer.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker is Max Wilbert, followed by Harry Sanger. Max, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Max Wilbert. I'm a resident of District 3, and I'm going to be a bit of a confusing, contrary voice today. So apologies in advance, but I'm hoping to actually make you think rather than repeating some talking points you may have heard a bunch of times before. Just to say who I am and establish a bit of credentials. I was a participant in the National Science Foundation climate science expedition to the Russian Arctic about a decade ago. I'm the co-author of a book called Bright Green Lies, which is an environmentalist perspective on a lot of renewable energy technologies. And I'm the co-founder of a community organization called Protect Thacker Pass, which is working to fight a lithium mine just over the Nevada border, north of Winnemucca, south of Burns, Oregon, in that lithium-rich area that really is going to become a battleground for Oregon, as it has been for Nevada over the past year. I'm very, very concerned about global warming. It's a serious issue. I think people also need to recognize that the ecological crisis that we're facing is primarily not driven by climate change at this point. The vast majority of species extinctions, for example, don't actually have anything to do with global warming. They're happening because of habitat destruction, because of urban sprawl and so on. This is a real issue when we start talking about these renewable energy technologies, which are not very dense. They require large amounts of land for mining, for wind farms, for solar energy installations, for transmission lines, and so on. I think it's also important to recognize that each electric car that's produced releases greenhouse gas emissions, often around 6 to 10, sometimes 12 tons per vehicle. And so we can't say that these technologies are good for the planet. They may be less harmful than fossil fuel powered vehicles, but frankly, not by much. Other places, other people, and the natural world are paying the price for these technologies. And in countries like Germany, which is really considered the leader of renewable energy around the world, they've seen pretty substantial issues with, one, the integration of intermittent renewable energy sources into the grid, two, a lot of local community opposition to massive transmission lines crisscrossing the country to bring power around, and three, they've seen big spikes in their electric bills. Now, I'm not advocating that we continue with fossil fuels because that's not going to work. But what I am saying is that we need to address these issues in ways that are actually going to work. And that means I think we have to address growth. If we don't address growth, then electrification is simply out of the frying pan into the fire. So this is my challenge to the county and to, I suppose, everyone who's listening here. Don't simply go for the low-hanging fruit. Changing these issues and changing our world is not as simple as simply swapping out what's under the hood of our cars or what is, powering a massive energy-consuming civilization. The real challenging questions are, how do we use less energy? How do we scale down? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbert.
Thank you for your public comments. Our next speaker is Harry Sanger, followed by Tressa Beaver. Mr. Sanger, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Good morning. Thanks for providing this forum this morning, and thanks for ensuring that everybody's voice gets heard. This has been a great forum so far, and I'd really like to segue off of that last speaker. I was going to add, the only real way to affect our impact on the climate is to reduce consumption. That outsourcing pollution, it just means that we don't see our impact and we're actually less likely to reduce consumption. So as long as we're consuming, shouldn't we have a resilient variety of energy sources? I heard one of the former commenters poo-poo on RNG, and they said it's not going to meet 1/5 of our state's needs, but if it met 1/5, isn't that helping contribute to the whole and providing an important piece of the puzzle, With that said, I'm going to go into the COVID discrimination is still ongoing. This board has told us not to mock and derive individuals who still believe a paper mask is doing something other than a placebo effect. Meanwhile, active discrimination is still happening in our community for those who are unvaccinated or don't wear a mask for a variety of legitimate reasons. Access to essential healthcare is restricted, and parents can't volunteer in schools. They aren't even allowed on campus still. And I have to ask, how can you pretend to care about equity but joyously embrace the COVID maximalist privilege that many of you have enjoyed throughout the past 2 years at the same time? So speaking of schools, 4J just went through a vigorous debate over whether raising administrator pay is equitable when classified workers are earning less than a living wage. I would like to ask you a similar question about the agenda item today regarding a 5% increase for the county administrator. Is that appropriate in light of the needs of other county employees and resources of the county? I'd like to thank Thomas Hura for commenting today with his first public comment. Lake Drive is right down the street from me and Ward, Chair Farr's district currently, but soon to be Commissioner Bozovich's under the new maps. I know that the city of Eugene is working on making Howard Avenue a safe route to school, and it would be great to see some attention paid to Lake Drive during that process. The crossing from Howard Avenue to Emerald Park is dangerous when I'm bicycling with my children. So would appreciate any attention paid to that. Finally, I think we just saw a key difference here today in the commenters. There's a group of people who want the government to force their ideology and provide no ability for choice. And then there's people who want the government to play a limited role as prescribed in our founding documents. This idea that people who think differently from them are being controlled by influences and need to be controlled by some all-knowing entity, it takes away our individual choice. And we've all seen with masks, individual choice is important. So I appreciate the diversity of thought on the Climate Action Committee, and I trust that this volunteer body will continue to hear multiple sides of thought being presented, and really appreciate the work that they've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singer.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker is Tressa Beaver, followed by Ali Lee. Tressa, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Thank you for extending this time today and allowing everyone who has a comment to comment. I am here today to talk about a few different issues. One is the under a closed door policy, there is a health pass / vaccine passport that is still on the docket to be rolled out. And I continue to encourage you to vote and stand against any mask mandates, vaccine mandates, and or vaccine passports, health passports, or any of the such. This is not a slave society, and we will not stand for that ever. Another thing that is of a real concern for me is this electrifying concept. We cannot just go to one source as the electric cars and just eliminate fossil fuels altogether. It is completely, it does not make any sense. It's completely ludicrous. And there is a wide array of companies in Oregon and across the United States that have ample toxic spewage from these corporate companies, and we need to address those who are doing the majority of the pollution in our society versus targeting the people. The people are not the ones that are creating these global warming issues. It is the big corporations. I highly recommend putting some sanctions on the real polluters and addressing the real issues. The Paul Pantone engine, from Paul Pantone, he had an engine, he built an engine that could literally run on a little bit of water and drive 100 miles an hour for 100 miles or more. And we need to address the real issue.
Thank you, Ms. Beaver. Ms. Jones, before we move to the next speaker, can you say approximately how many people are left in the queue to speak this morning?
Commissioner Farr, or Chair Farr, excuse me, I have one speaker left. It's Ali Lee. I believe Ali would like to speak, but her hand's not up, but she has sent me an email. That would be the final speaker I show.
Very good, Ms. Jones. Let's
like
proceed with Ms. Lee, and Ms. Lee will be the last speaker. We're approaching the 10 o'clock hour and a very full agenda to be concluded before noon today with a host of staff waiting for their presentations. So, Ms. Jones, thank you.
Thank you. Ali, I will go ahead and unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. I do show you are self-muted, Ali. There you go.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Great, thank you so much to the county commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to provide my testimony. My name is Ali Lee. I was born and raised in Eugene, Oregon, and I'm a health and equity electrification specialist with Climate Solutions for Oregon and Washington. I also sit on the national team for the building electrification and would be happy to be a source at any time for any information. We've worked a lot on climate action plans across the country, as well as ordinances and resolutions as well. So happy to be a resource. I'm testifying to thank you for all of your hard work and ask that you be the leaders in our county on climate change. Growing up in Eugene, we were all raised from the time we could walk to run, and the outdoors was always and still is our playground. As we approach some of the most prestigious events showcased around the world, I would hope that our expansion and drive to have the best facilities in the world would also include our health and clean living that we so pride ourselves on and that we do a great job on. Let's not go back to the days where we had sort of the pictures of the shoebox to where we had air pollution. That was when we did not have the best air pollution. We were the highest in air pollution. Sorry about that. Today, the American Lung Association says that Eugene scores B for ozone. We also have 4,381 cases of pediatric asthma, 35,000 cases of adult asthma, 19,200 cases of COPD, 189 cases of lung cancer, and 26,000 in cardiovascular disease. We have a population that is also impacted. We have 52,000 people living in poverty and over 71,000 people of color who have health impacts. This needs to be to the forefront. Health inequity is a big concern. Burning gas in buildings in the city, county, and states is our fastest growing source of greenhouse gas emissions. And it's a significant impact in our health, says a Harvard study. The World Health Organization says that we rank air quality second in highest to climate change. I want to say how important it is that we come together as not only communities, businesses, and government. This cap will then help to do so. And it's important to then also ask that NGS1 be supported. Transitioning off of fossil fuels is critical. It's stepping into mitigation of the worst impacts of the climate crisis while creating more resilient and healthy communities to the face of impacts that we are already experiencing here in Oregon. It's important that we also remember that low-income families have access to capital to assist in the transition of their homes, and that includes utilizing city and other public dollars to assist them in sort of a coalition style to then meet those needs. In light of this information, it's critical that Lane County take concrete steps to implement this.
Thank you, Ms. Lee, and thank you, Ms. Jones, for conducting the queue for speakers today. Thank you for everyone who spoke. Commissioners, let's take a few minutes to conduct commissioner response and/or other issues and remonstrances. I will look to the queue for hands raised. There we go, Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. It was really great to hear such a range of issues weighed in on and diversity of voices. So thank you to everyone who took time, whether for your first time or you've been here with us before, for taking your 3 minutes to let us know what's on your mind. Really appreciate that. Really briefly, I just wanted to say I was absent last week because I had the great honor and privilege of representing Lane County in Washington, D.C. on the United Front trip, which is an initiative that brings multiple jurisdictions together to lobby on federal policy administrative changes and seek appropriations for a number of projects. And it was really, we were really well received. It was a great trip, and I wanted to let folks know we talked about a number of things on behalf of Lane County. I was able to talk about our needs for more behavioral health services here in Lane County, housing and homelessness, seismic hardening of public buildings, more rural broadband, talked about fire recovery issues and much more, and also able to lift up the concerns of our other jurisdictional partners. It was a great trip, and look forward to working with staff to bring more of a briefing back to you about what all was covered and what we hope to see the fruits of that trip in the months and years to come here at Lane County. And in the interest of brevity, I will just end by acknowledging, speaking of Washington, D.C., and events there, I will just close by noting the historic event and vote that took place in Washington last Thursday, and close with the 6 words, Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trieger. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I too want to appreciate everybody who came out to speak today. This is probably the most folks. I've counted 17 of them speaking today, and I write notes on each and every person, every single meeting, to keep track of what is the hottest topic clearly today, the big topic is the climate action plan that's coming up later in our agenda. So I will save my comments for that agenda item, but I wanted to acknowledge to all those that have written in or called in. I have thoroughly reviewed each and every letter and comment that comes in, and I greatly appreciate the varying views and thoughts about the plan itself. And of course, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I want to let everybody know that I do indeed take into consideration all that input each and every time we have a policy decision on our plate and our agenda for the day. And thank you again for taking the time and getting involved.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. And I'll remind everyone that in addition to our regular Board of Commissioners meeting today, we will have a joint meeting as the Board of Health and Board of Commissioners. Commissioner Bernie.
You know, first I want to not only thank everyone for making comments, but I really want to thank those that weren't voices that we do hear on a fairly regular basis. I think the more greater diversity of input and public testimony is only healthy. Second, I want to, you know, there's so much that was just provided. I write notes on everyone too, and it's just, you know, you want to respond, and I don't want to wait to respond until the climate action thing is on our docket. I really want to respond to some of you that spoke right now. And forgive me, I'm just going to identify a few. For Bethany Cotton, I encourage everyone to read the latest UN climate report. It is extremely dire. I've never heard the terms you use, climate anxiety and grief. I found those, you know, I think they kind of hit the mark for many people. But the thing you said, which for me is tantamount, is that often good plans written are not followed by action. I have seen that for over 4 decades of trying to make change in various arenas of life. It's probably one of the most frustrating things. The knowledge base is so often there. A direction is so often available, and so often it ends up on a shelf somewhere. I know that's not the intention of this activity. For Dennis Reynolds, I just want to share that when Pope Francis came out with his climate encyclical, one of the activities of my business at the time, which was a clean energy commercial and industrial retrofit niche market in construction, was we developed new financing types because the Catholic Church had no ability, given the covenants and conditions that existed between a diocese and the pieces of real estate in that diocese. There was no ability to put solar and storage on pieces of real estate. And my company actually did develop a hybrid financial instrument or product that enabled that. And now that is occurring across the country, and I share the intentions of that. I want to also say that oftentimes the perfect is the enemy of the possible. Whatever comes out and is approved by this body, and I will be voting to approve something because it is the time to move beyond sitting on it and talking about it. I want to remind everyone that 3.5 short years ago, staff were not even saying the words climate change in public discussions. 3.5 short years ago, this body was not entertaining and has never had a climate action plan. Whatever plan that we introduce will be a living document. I noticed that the plan being presented does not have a vision, which is one of the things I want to, you know, build in and work toward in the future, is a vision of what does Lane County look, what does a carbon-free Lane County look like? How is it good for business? How does it create jobs? Et cetera, et cetera. So I think that we are moving, we will be moving in a direction, and I think it is good that voices are being heard. And, you know, from business to activists to all organizations, I think we're going to get off our duff and start moving forward in ways that actually can help create additional business opportunities. I'll be discussing those when we discuss it. There's just so much to talk about, but I did want to make those points. And I also want to agree, the cleanest energy is the energy that's not used. And for those people that talked about how do we in fact decrease consumption, I think that's a topic that this plan is missing, and a topic that's going to need to be discussed also. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to make those comments. And thank you, presenters, so much for your input today.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to note that even though we didn't use the term climate action plan, that this county was involved in conservation efforts to the point where when we finally decided to hire staff at over $200,000 a year and hire consultants at another $100,000, that when we did an inventory and compared ourselves to other counties in this state, we had the lowest per capita carbon footprint out of the 5 counties that we compared with for our county operations. We had been successful in trying to reduce our carbon footprint without having to label it as such. In addition to that, I really want to thank Max Wilbert for his comments that are thought-provoking, because he does get down to a core issue, which is population growth is driving a lot of our environmental issues. And I just want to note for him and others, I am the only person on this board that made a conscious decision not to procreate. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. And I'll take a couple of minutes. There is a lot to say, as it's been stated earlier. Regarding comments that I made in the board meeting a week ago, I'd like to invite people to watch the actual board meeting to hear the context of the comments that I made regarding COVID and vaccination. Remind everybody that the World Games are going to be conducted in Lane County, and in fact throughout Oregon this summer, and we'll be inviting a lot of people from all over the world to come into our community. Now, other communities don't have the same kind, other countries don't have the same kind of pediatric vaccination regimen that we have in the United States. And you know, when I was growing up in England, it was normal to have for a child to have mumps, measles, even whooping cough and other diseases. That's not normal today. The generation prior to mine, it was normal to fear polio. All of those things have been taken care of through vaccinations. And I want to remind people that pediatric vaccination is essential, particularly in light of the fact that we will have people from all over the world coming into our community directly, and remind you that pediatric providers are willing, able, and eager to provide vaccinations to kids in our community on an ongoing basis, as they always have. The second thing I wanted to mention very quickly was that I first got involved with the Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission in 1995. And back then, there was a flame burning outside of the commission. It burned for decades. They were burning off the methane that was being produced, the natural methane production of the sewage processing plant. It was there. It was always there. 2 weeks ago, two weeks ago, Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission, and I spent the last 5 years as your representative to the commission, including 2 years as vice president and president. 2 weeks ago, we cut the ribbon on our renewable natural gas. All the methane that's been burned off for decades and decades will now be introduced into the system as renewable natural gas. It could not have been done, and I'm going to say this out loud, it could not have been done without the hand-holding and help of Northwest Natural Gas. They helped us put the facility in place, helped us get the process in place to scrub the gas in order for it to be introduced into the system. And it is leading the way in the actual production of renewable natural gas, which portends well for another huge methane producer, Short Mountain, our landfill. At some point, we'll be doing the same there that we've done at Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission, introducing renewable natural gas into the natural gas system. So with that, commissioners, we'll move along in our agenda. I'd like to thank you for entertaining the public discussion that we've had already. and we'll move along with our consent calendar. Before us, we have the consent calendar for April 12th, 2022. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Buck and silently seconded by, there we go, by Commissioner Burney. And I will mention that all the items on this consent calendar, if you view our agenda online and click on view material, you'll see all the information regarding each of the items, short consent calendar today, that the board is considering this morning. So I have a motion.
Excuse me, Chair, for the record, that was me that moved to approve.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then it's been moved by Vice Chair Trieger and seconded by Commissioner Burney, consent calendar for April 12th, 2022. Any discussion to the motion? I see none, then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. And we'll move along to item 6 on our agenda, which is a discussion on our monthly Holiday Farm fire update. Today, Mr. Mokrahajski, you have a panel which is including Mr. Matt McCray. Mr. Mokrahajski.
Thanks, Chair. I'll turn it over to Matt to give the presentation.
Good morning, Chair Farr, Commissioners. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I have about 10 minutes of presentation and then the remaining 20 minutes for questions as works for you. I'm just gonna try to share my screen and it's gonna work smoothly. Can you see my screen okay? Great.
Affirmative.
Thanks so much. So again, 10 minutes and then the rest of the time for discussion here. So I'm going to move fairly swiftly through this. There's only about 8 slides. As I do, trying to figure out how to advance here. There we go. Can you see the shelter slide now? Great. So we regularly talk about the number of people who are sheltered still in hotels as a starting place. So the current number for April is 88 survivors who are sheltering in hotels in Eugene and Springfield. I do think it's important to remind us all that this is just the folks who are in state-funded shelter. This doesn't reflect people who are sheltering with friends or family or who are in other publicly funded shelters. It is good to see the number going down somewhat steadily, but there's still, a fair number of people who are in that situation. And then I'm going to move right over to a quick summary of permits. So I want to start here with the adjustment. I mentioned this when we talked about community development block grant funds in March. The number of dwellings lost has been revised upward based on some ground truthing that has been done by our staff. And I want to very briefly explain why. So if you recall, the formal number we were reporting before was 464. So we're up just over 100 dwellings that were lost. So the initial numbers that we were using were based on an initial count that was done actually while the fire was still smoldering. So just days after the fire passed through the McKenzie area. And it was done by people who were not necessarily from this area. So there was fire marshal's office sending people out. And for anybody who went upriver, you recall that like addresses, any postages or signs of any indication of an actual physical address was gone, right? Lost in the fire. So there was a lot of kind of guessing of what was a lot and what wasn't. They didn't have with them, as I understand it, a map of the tax lots, for example. When those numbers came back, our staff in the GIS team felt like it wasn't quite right, so they sent some sheriffs out to take a look and found that there were indeed some contradictions and numbers that were off. And they decided that the only way we could get really solid numbers was to conduct a full assessment. So they sent out road crews to go lot by lot and do a much more thorough count with a map of the tax lots in front of them. And that's why we have that revised upward number. Anyway, I just want to be clear. I understand it's a pretty significant increase in numbers and important for us to track going forward, but that is the official number. It's also the one that the state is using. So then I'm going to compare everything to that new revised number of 574 dwellings lost. We have permits submitted for 203 dwellings, which from my perspective is a pretty significantly high number, about a third of properties. So for comparison, we're not quite 2 years in, right? We're about a year and a half after the fires. My understanding from talking with the wildfire recovery manager in Paradise, California, which is a wildly different situation, but one that we could compare to for this purpose, they had about 10% of dwellings that were permitted to be replaced at year 2. So we're already, beyond that number of permitted dwellings. So I think, if we use that as a comparator, I think we're in a good spot. Recognizing there's a ton of work to do, and for people who lost their homes, a year and a half is extremely difficult. I don't mean to minimize that. The total number of permits issued is just slightly under the number that have been submitted. And then dwellings completed, we've seen 46 dwellings now completed. That includes manufactured homes and stick-built homes. Just to try something a little bit different, this is the same numbers, but just giving you kind of a sense of the trend. So at the top there, the dotted blue line is the total number of homes lost if we're comparing that to where we want to be. On the left-hand side is October of 2021, and on the very far right is July of this year. And we can see that the number of building permits submitted and issued, and the number of homes completed is just kind of steadily rising. And if this serves you, I'll continue to try and bring this back so we can look at the trend as things proceed. And then the number of properties that were affected by the Holiday Farm fire is 600, and the number of properties sold since September 7th is 109. So a significant portion of the properties that were damaged in the fire have been sold. And the number of emergency RV permits, which are free permits, but allow people to live on their property in an RV as they're rebuilding or for other circumstances, it has stayed pretty steady in the mid 80s. And from there, I'm going to touch on a few other kind of community-wide things that are going on. Some of you may have seen this headline in the Eugene Weekly recently, a handful of things going on in Blue River. As you may recall, the Jones family donated a 16-acre parcel in Blue River that used to be a mill site. It has been donated to the community of Blue River. It is being held in trust by Mackenzie River Trust. And there's a fair amount of growing community dialogue about what that property could do, how the community might want to prioritize the use of that property. I'm not going to go into detail, but just to let you know that conversation's happening. We, Lane County, are supporting and looking forward to seeing what that property can do to support recovery. I also want to note that there's a transportation growth management project in Blue River that has been lined up for some time. Lane County is working with staff at DLCD to hire a consultant to do much of the on-the-ground work. And that provides a property to reevaluate the boundaries of Blue River and how and some of the zoning in Blue River. And then lastly, because one of the people in that photo that you're looking at there is Lane Tompkins, he's the superintendent of the school district. I also want to note that at the end of March, the governor signed a law that will provide funding for fire-affected school districts, including the Mackenzie School District, by continuing to fund them at the level of enrollment they had prior to the fire. So that's a really significant shift that provides some stability for school districts that were affected by fires. Next, I want to talk about the work that Homes for Good is doing. This is a modular home. This is one under construction in Idaho from a facility that the state is purchasing modular homes from. This particular one headed to Jackson County, not Lane County, but we have on order 20 of the same unit. And I want to just very briefly call out a distinction between manufactured homes and modular homes. You can see, if you look closely at this photo, the walls of this home are quite a bit thicker. compared to manufactured homes, which are built to a HUD standard, Housing and Urban Development Standard, these modular homes are built to the building code. And so they have full 6-inch thick walls. So they have greater durability, greater energy efficiency. And we're going to see a number of homes like this in fire affected communities, including, as I mentioned, 20 that are headed toward Lazy Days. The team at Homes for Good has been making great progress at Lazy Days, preparing the sanitary system. They took a look at what's there, working on getting the sanitary system prepared, and then moving on to preparing the ground for the delivery of these modular homes. I will absolutely give you a heads up when these modular homes are headed this way, so that if you'd like, you could take a look at them. I also want to call out some of the innovations that Homes for Good is doing on a 5-acre property that they are working on in Blue River. They're purchasing park model RVs, which are similarly, they're built to a fairly durable standard. They're built in manufacturing facilities, but they're much smaller than a modular or manufactured homes. These park model RVs, as they're called, the ones that are being ordered for this 5-acre parcel are on the order of 400 square feet. So they're quite a bit smaller, but accommodate an individual or a couple fairly well is the idea. And lastly, the team at Homes for Good is continuing their due diligence on looking at the U.S. Basketball Academy as a potential long-term housing site. All right, moving on. I'm not intending for you to read this map, but it's a map of Blue River, and where the Blue River flows through the town of Blue River. And I just want to call out some work that's being done there. You all approved the county using resources to look into a letter of map revision and to do consolidated letter of map amendments, which allows property owners whose property is questionably in the flood zone to get a clear proof that they can provide showing whether they are in or out, and in many of these cases, removing people from the technical flood zone. So it's just it's taking a closer look at the flood maps and the topography. And so we, Lane County, through your guidance, are working on this, providing this group letter of map amendment work, and so far has already provided a letter of map amendment for 70 properties in this area. So it's really helping move the ball down the field to allow people to rebuild more swiftly and without that individual expense of dealing with the LOMA on their own. And then lastly, I'm just going to hit on a few quick topics that I don't have slides for. Oregon Solutions Project continues to move forward. We have now established 3 distinct subcommittees, one on housing, one on wastewater infrastructure, and one on economic recovery. I also want to call out that the state reimbursement, the state incentives for fire hardening are now live. And so the county is able to provide reimbursement for those who are rebuilding and adding fire protection measures to their dwellings. So to the extent that you're involved in conversations with survivors who are rebuilding and you want to let them know about that, please do. And if you have thoughts about how we might promote that program in ways that we're not already, please let me know. I also want to call out that septic incentives across the fire affected area are right on the horizon. We're just about to have an agreement in place with the state to get funds for water and septic, and we'll be working in a partnership with EWEB. They already have incentives in the terms of low interest loans for people to improve their septic systems. And our plan here is to take these funds and turn those loans into grants, or at least partially grant a portion of payment on those loans. So really trying to leverage the existing systems that are in our area and work in partnership with EWEB. The needs assessment conducted by the McKenzie Valley Long-Term Recovery Group is near completion. They are working with Oregon Solutions to get a final report completed. And then lastly, I want to call out that Devin Ashbridge and Marianne Nolte County staff are working with Locals Helping Locals to arrange a permit workshop in Blue River. So the permit staff will be available to help residents with permit questions at the Mackenzie River Community School in Blue River on May 7 from 10 to 2. So again, continuing to see our land management division team lean in to try and provide service, in this case on a weekend for people who can't get in to see Marianne on a weekday. That's all I have in terms of presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ms. McRae. I'm going to be looking to the hands raised in the queue, but thanks for presenting a whole lot of information in a really short time-wise.
Sorry.
No, you could have gone on for a long time elaborating on some of the things. I just have kind of a rhetorical question before we get started. We're buying manufactured homes from Idaho. Why are we buying them from Idaho? All the materials here. That's just, it's rhetorical at this point. You don't need to answer that.
Understood.
I'll go to the queue. You know, we have the capability here in Oregon. Why are we at the point right now where we're buying them from Idaho? So we'll go to the queue. Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, and thank you so much, as always, for the really great work that you're doing up there. It was one of the first data points you gave, so I want to make sure I was understanding the permits submitted versus issued. It looked like 166 submitted, 138 issued, and I assume those overlap, so that's 28 that are pending. Is that, am I understanding that right, or are those two separate?
That's correct. Okay. Exactly.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Burney.
I'd like to follow up first on Commissioner Trieger's point. Matt, it would be much, I found the first slide a little. Could you get that first slide up again?
Yeah, let me pull that up.
Thanks a lot. Maybe it's a second. I don't want to talk about the wrong thing. Maybe I could, while you're doing that, well, oh, you did it. Okay. Next slide.
Yeah. Is that the one you're looking for?
Yes. Dwelling permits submitted, 203. For me, maybe you want to keep this format, but there's another format that would be even more helpful.
Sure.
Consider that 100% of the dwelling permits submitted. Then I would like to know what percent of that are dwelling permits issued and dwellings completed.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? That would be much more help. Thank you.
Sure.
And I don't know, Commissioner Trieger, if that responds to a little of what you were asking, but for me, that would be really helpful.
I'm happy to do that.
Number two, I have to ask this. I'm sorry. Chair Farr is kinder than I. Do you have an answer to his question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I not answer it?
That's a curiosity to me too.
Oh,
especially as this body is trying to invest more money locally and spend money with local contractors that generate local jobs.
Yeah, no, great question. And I understood it as rhetorical, and I was holding off because I was trying to preserve time. Absolutely great question. My understanding from working with Michael Mortar, who's the gentleman at the state who really was taking the lead on trying to secure modular homes for use in Oregon, is that the Oregon manufacturers just weren't prepared and they weren't taking the inquiries very seriously. But now that we've placed orders for several hundred units from Idaho, I guess, as I understand it, Oregon manufacturers are more interested. So yes, there is capacity here. Some of them are building manufactured homes, and retooling for modular homes can be a little bit different. It's slightly different materials, but that's my understanding, is that we did talk with Oregon based producers, and they just were not tooled or prepared to engage in that at the time of the fire. I think that will change over time.
You know, thank you. That makes sense to me. I know that after the fires, people were waiting a year, which was amazing, from wanting to purchase a manufactured home to being able to get it. I don't know if it's possible, but I would love to have us reach out to that manufactured home body you talked about and learn how and if they're increasing capacity to respond to this, because I think this is sadly a strong market now and probably going to be a growing market as we move forward. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Matt.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. And in response to that rhetorical question, it's pretty complex why we're not providing them here in Oregon. There are a lot of smaller manufacturers. For instance, Kalapuya High School is going to be making small modular homes. So we have a lot of small providers who can do a much more robust job than we've invited them to do. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. Just to tag off that a tad this is a large order by the state of Oregon. And so we're getting, just a sliver of that particular order. So we weren't engaging directly with the manufacturer itself. I wanted to touch and ask and kind of follow up on the LOMAs and LOMARs. So Matt, how many did you say were issued so far?
Just over 70.
I find this really significant. So issuing these LOMAs has been a work in progress for nearly a year. I've been working with the planning staff and an outstanding volunteer in the community that provided a huge data set in order for this work to actually initiate. And that gentleman's name is George Greer. He does not live in the fire zone, but he was very invested in, very knowledgeable of land and land use, and was able to do a ton of legwork in order to provide the data set in order to initiate this. And now it's coming to fruition. We've had a lot of conversations about land use and land use issues and the recovery of the McKenzie corridor, and people who are in the floodway or in the floodplain, and guidelines surrounding rebuilding of that. But when they shouldn't be in it in the first place is the bigger question that's starting to be answered for these folks that are getting LOMAs. And we are waiting with bated breath on a LOMAR, which will do it for a larger community as a whole, rather than individual letters of map amendment by lot. This is really exciting. The people up in Blue River are thrilled to see this come through, and our staff has done an exorbitant amount of work to make this happen. So I want to give my huge appreciation to all those who've been making this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. In response, Ms. McRae, I didn't really hear a question there, but.
Yeah, no, I would agree. It is really significant, and I can't take any of the credit. It's the team at the Land Management Division that really has done all the lifting there.
Right on. Thank you, Matt and Ms. McRae. Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you, Chair. So before we pat ourselves too heavily on the back, I'll just note that Marion County had issued 40% of their unincorporated lost dwellings last June of 2021. That's the most recent data I had from Marion County when I did a comparison between counties. I'll just a side note on manufactured and modular homes and the fact that we're having to buy from Idaho. A lot of manufacturing industry has moved out of this state post corporate activities tax and other various legislature that's made the business climate here difficult for people to justify investment in retooling to do things like take a manufactured home facility and make it into a modular home facility. We are our own worst enemy sometimes in that, and a lot of it has moved to the state of Idaho. So I wasn't exactly surprised that we're buying stuff from Idaho. On the LOMAs, it's great we're doing that, but it's fascinating because that slide you brought up of Blue River was the exact same slide I brought up during our discussion of the floodplain ordinance last fall, when I asked this board not to pass it because it was going to impact fire victims. Fortunately, House Bill 2289 rolled back a lot of that. But during that discussion, Commissioner Buck, who's now talking about how it's great to remove people from the floodplain, was questioning whether the floodplain was even accurate because climate was actually going to expand it. And my discussion about 2 feet over the 100-year floodplain being over the 500-year floodplain in many instances was poo-pooed because how inaccurate floodplain is. So I appreciate the work. It's really good work. It's work I've actually done myself as an engineer to a letter of map amendment. And my experience was all just kind of go away. You don't know what you're talking about. And we need to pass this oppressive ordinance because we're protecting people from themselves. But I'm really happy to see the people of Blue River benefit from this work. Finally, I'll just note that most of the board has been included in correspondence between Dan Hill and Keir Miller. And I just want to say one more time that I would like to see land management take the most liberal and permissive view of House Bill 2289. And it seems like some of these arguments over what footprint is, particularly when it comes to floodplains, has got to stop. Apparently there's an elderly couple that's being stressed out by the fact that they have a house that dates back to the 40s, so stuff wasn't permitted because we weren't issuing permits then, and we're having arguments about what the footprint is relative to a reconstruction. That's got to stop. We have to stop taking nitpicky, determinations and be, liberal and permissive and get people back in their homes. I appreciate the work. I appreciate all the effort. Really appreciate the contribution from the Jones family up there in Blue River. And hopefully we can get things back to normal for these people.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. And Commissioner Bernie, before we go into the second round, ever so briefly, I know, Commissioner Bozievich, when I walk in the sand and I look behind me, I see what my footprint is. It doesn't need to be redefined. My footprint is where my foot touched the ground. Commissioner Bernie.
Thank you, Chair. Rather than whine and moan and complain, although I do agree with that particular instance, and I do agree that we need to be permissive as much as possible and get people in. I think we're doing a great job, and I want to thank Commissioner Buck because she's the one more than any of us that have put in time and sweat and labor and research and advocacy in this particular topic. But what I wanted to say was this. When I taught high school about 45 years ago, there were construction tech classes. And those construction tech classes were building homes. And those homes were sold. And those homes were moved. And they were placed on lots. We're in a different environment now. I think the opportunity for construction tech classes in every high school, I know we have no authority here, but I'm just going to say it, for every high school in the state, in the country, but certainly in Lane County, to be teaching kids and building ADUs according to specs already approved by cities, building manufactured homes according to specs required. What a great opportunity for young people to learn, provide a service, and help communities such as Blue River get back on their feet. So I just wanted to end it with a positive and say there's so much more we could do, and I really want to advocate for that. Even though this may go nowhere, I really believe in that very deeply. Thank you, Chair.
And thank you for that, Commissioner Bernie. And while we do have no authority over schools per se, we are the Board of County Commissioners. I did have lunch with breakfast this morning with the chair of the Bethel School Board. And I will tell you this about Bethel. At Calapooya High School, they are doing exactly that. At Calapooya, the alternate high school, it can be done. So moving right along, I want to thank you again, Ms. McRae, for a good presentation. You gave us a great deal of information, a great deal to speculate on. I have a quick question. My question is this: the Holiday Farm fire. I woke up in the morning. We were camping on the shores of the Siuslaw River in Florence, and the wind was howling. That east wind was blowing that pushed the Holiday Farm fire. The smoke was all the way down in Florence, and I thought it was from the Sweet Creek fire, which was a couple of miles up the river. Found out quickly that it was from the Holiday Farm fire, from this historic east wind that just whipped that flame down the valley. Tell me this: how did that fire start? What is the point of origin of that fire?
There's not yet an official conclusion of the source of the fire. My understanding is that it's electrical in nature, but in terms of the exact source, I would wait and defer to the fire marshal to make that determination for us.
And we're waiting for that, but all speculation I've heard is that it is electrical in nature.
Yeah.
Then we'll move along with our, thank you, Ms. McRae, and
Thank you, Chair.
the presentation. We'll hear from you again, probably in about a month, I do believe. We'll move along to in our agenda. Ms. McRae, unless you have anything that you wish to add before we conclude this item.
No, Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much. Then we'll move along to item 6B, which is order and resolution 22-04-12-03 in the matter of approving the Climate Action Plan Phase 2 Community Greenhouse Mitigation Action Plan. And today, Mr. McRae, we have a great panel, including Mr. Hurley and Mr. Nystrom. But Mr. McRae, will you introduce your panel?
We have Dan Hurley, our Public Works Director, and Mark Nystrom, our Climate Strategist. So Dan and Mark will give you the presentation.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm pleased to present our Community Climate Action Plan for your review today. We've been at this work for more than 2 years, and in that time, we've achieved some significant accomplishments, including completing our first greenhouse gas inventory. We completed our Phase 1 internal climate action plan. We've stepped up a climate advisory committee, and now we have this Phase 2 community climate action plan for your approval today. This is the third time we've presented a draft for your review. And while the plan may still not be perfect, it does provide a clear pathway for action. Our climate action strategist, Mark Nystrom, who's with me today, and our consultants from Good Company have continued to work with stakeholders to incorporate feedback from the last time you reviewed this document. And while some stakeholders are still unsatisfied with where we've landed on specific items, in particular natural gas, the plan has incorporated data from the natural gas industry to align with their intended path to decarbonize. On the issue of natural gas, I'd like to be clear that the plan does not ban natural gas in homes or businesses. Lane County does not have the authority to ban natural gas. But the plan does contain a strategy to encourage electrification of appliances over time. This is because electric heating and cooling is clearly the lower emissions alternative at this time. And we've included a table into this revision to make that evident to the public. As the natural gas industry continues to evolve and develop more biogas and potentially hydrogen fuel, we may want to revisit this strategy. The plan will need regular revisions to assess how we're doing, to close the remaining gap, and to incorporate new technologies. I'm hopeful, particularly as this is your last board meeting before Earth Day, that the plan meets your approval, having sound, achievable emissions reduction strategies, and it will become our guiding document for reducing greenhouse gas emissions in Lane County and modeling climate action for other communities. And with that, I will pass to Mark Nystrom, who has some additional remarks. He'll take you through a high overview again of the plan and hone in on some of the changes since this was last brought to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Farr, and thanks, Dan, for the introduction. I'm going to share my screen and walk through a few slides. Just 1 second as we get this forward. So I want to start with a process review. But first, I'd like to thank Commissioner Burney and the board for having the vision to allow the staff the last couple of months to fine-tune the greenhouse gas mitigation plan. Since January, staff have had the opportunity to hear from a wide variety of stakeholders, including concerned citizens, Northwest Natural, climate and environmental justice groups, labor unions, electrical utilities, and chambers of commerce. These conversations resulted in the plan that you see in front of you today. While this is a living plan, it's not perfect, it provides the county with a broad framework to begin taking action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. A few stakeholders have provided feedback as recently as this week, and staff acknowledge that there are some minor non-substantive improvements that can be made to the plan that can clarify some points and correct some grammar, spelling, and typos. There are other suggestions that were provided that will be added to the community suggested actions appendix. Now I want to take a few moments and remind everyone how we got to where we are today. Lane County began the process of developing a community climate action plan back in August 2020. Staff working with Good Company and Enviro Issues conducted a community-wide action plan survey to ask people what they wanted to be engaged in and the topics they wanted to discuss. We used that result to create a work plan. Additionally, staff and Good Company conducted a community-wide GHG inventory, which was presented to you in December of 2020. A snapshot of these emissions are displayed on the right of your screen. We measured local emissions totaling over 4.2 million metric tons in 2019. Based on the work and the inventory results, Lane County staff began a 6-month-long public engagement process. Due to restrictions related to COVID, all these meetings were held virtually. First, we had 5 topic-focused stakeholder meetings with electrical and gas utilities, cities, districts, and state agencies in the spring of 2021. Then staff held 6 community-focused virtual meetings, both topic and location-based, in the summer of 2021. At the same time, we had an online open house where community members were invited to learn more about Lane County's greenhouse gas emissions and potential actions to reduce emissions. The community was also invited to fill out a survey, and these results are found in the appendix of the plan. Finally, staff held many individual community-based interviews and attended several virtual meetings. These meetings and interviews covered a wide range of topics and involved individuals and groups from across Lane County. The first draft of the plan was available online about 5 months ago in November 2021. The greenhouse gas plan is built around these 10 high impact practices. The high impact practice is a term used to describe actions that are recognized by climate professionals as the best and most cost-effective way for local governments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Using the latest and best available data, these actions were scaled, is the term we use, by Good Company to determine the reduction potential on emissions in each year, in each of these categories now through 2040. Each of the high impact practices are summarized in 1 to 2 pages. Each section also includes some suggestions for what you can do at home or your office to take personal action. The goal of the report is not only to show you what's possible given current or near-term technology, but also to be easily accessible to everyone in the community. However, for those of you who are interested in the process, the technical analysis, and assumptions, all those are found in our appendices. As you can see, the list of high impact practices on the right-hand side, the actions are in order of cumulative impact. So the top actions have the highest impact, the bottom impacts are the smallest impact. Focusing in on 2040, so this is our farthest forward that we scaled. The waterfall graphic highlights the annual greenhouse gas mitigation for that year. You can see by that time, transportation emissions are reduced by nearly 3 million metric tons annually, but the impact of some of the actions are diminished because of investments and efforts made over the previous 18 years. So we can put it in another format. This donut graph shows you all of our emissions across Lane County. The darker colors highlight the emissions reduced by actions described in the plan, while the lighter colors are the areas where innovations will be needed in the future. There are many promising technologies that may be added in the near future that can be added to future plans. This is a reminder that this is a living document and staff will always be making effort to include technological innovations. In addition to the main body of the document, there are several appendices. During our virtual outreach, community members suggested many climate-friendly actions that they would like to see Lane County take. These actions are summarized in the first appendix. I would suggest that that's where some of these actions that other folks have talked about, that's the perfect place for them. I look at them as kind of our bullpen, you know, a place to look for next actions to add to the plan. Other entities in our community area are already taking community-related actions, and the state and federal government are now starting to put resources towards reducing emissions. These actions are also summarized in the appendix. This is a living document. Things are changing fast, and so we'll need to do continuous updates on that particular one. And then the technical analysis of the high impact practices and the summaries of the engagement survey and public meetings can also be found on the appendix. We did some new math since the last version, and the electricity versus natural gas assumptions and math will be updated soon, but that's available right now. And then there's a document that compares the original draft, so the November draft with the 2020 or March 2022 draft. And then our plan updates include, from that time, emissions reductions were recalculated. The HIP strategies, we updated the appliance electrification. What the impetus for all of this was that between the December presentation and the January 2022 discussion for approval, the Oregon Environmental Quality Commission approved the Oregon Climate Protection Program. The CPP regulates natural gas related greenhouse gas emissions for the first time, which influences the results of our plan. So we had to update the math to reflect those changes. So by 2050, the gas in the system will be required to reduce emissions by 90% compared to 2019. These reductions will be done through a variety of approaches, including energy efficiency, renewable natural gas, hydrogen, carbon offsets, and community compliance instruments. The Lane County Greenhouse Gas Mitigation Plan adjusted the impact of appliance electrification for the March 2022 version. This affected the overall impact of the plan, reducing the total emission reduction potential from 73% to 71%. And then we removed the natural gas infrastructure section. This section created significant confusion and controversy for members of our community. Again, like Dan said, Lane County has no regulatory authority to regulate public use of natural gas like the cities in Lane County. Staff integrated the important points of the strategy, limiting the use of fossil fuels in areas where they're not efficient substitutes throughout the rest of the plan, and clarified that the actions Lane County operations are directly going to take. This section was replaced with a more comprehensive discussion of the state mandated reductions in greenhouse gas emissions for both the electrical and natural gas systems. It highlights the challenges in demand, reliability, technology, and costs for both the electrical and gas grids. There's one sentence in this section that was described as untrue by some of the public comment, and staff acknowledged that it was unintentionally ambiguous, and the sentence will be rewritten for clarity's sake. But it won't change the content of the material. And then the board order was also updated based on community feedback. Staff will provide annual progress reports starting in March 2024. That wasn't in the original board document. And then there'll be an updated community greenhouse gas mitigation plan by 2027 if it's requested by the board. And that's what I have for you. So I am going to stop sharing my screen and take time for questions.
Mr. Nystrom, thank you very much for all of your work that's brought us to this point, and thank you for the adaptation of some of the community's concerns as we see them in the revised draft. And thank you, Mr. Hurley, for your presentation. At this point, Ms. Murgarsky, I'm going to turn it over to the board for questions and comments. I'll be looking to the queue for those questions and comments. And I currently don't see anyone in the queue. Mr. Nystrom, while I wait for the queue to materialize, and I do see it beginning, I'll point out to the public that the draft plan is in the documents that are provided to the board and to the public in our agenda today. If you click on view material, that'll give you the entire documentation and much of the history that got us to this point. Then we'll move along with the queue, and I will have a couple of questions, a couple of very pointed questions toward the end, Mr. Nystrom. Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you, Chair. So first, I want to say I'm really happy that we included the climate protection plan data and projections based on that, even though I believe the current climate protection plan has been done extra constitutionally by executive order of the governor and is not valid law. And that's what most of the lawsuits are about, not about the actual actions of the plan. Process. Ruling by executive decree is not what we passed in this country. We have a constitution. I'm also really glad to hear that you're going to remove the language around the need for expansion of customer base to continue the maintenance of the Northwest Natural System. That was a complete erroneous statement the way it's stated. I hope that's clarified or deleted in its entirety. That said, there's still significant problems with this plan. First of all, the statements around electrical capacity to meet growing needs. I'll start with EWEB and work upwards because EWEB's ability to serve is based on the Northwest power grid. But even in EWEB's study that you reference, the very next item after number 6 says that in order to maintain this capacity, electric vehicle charging has to happen off peak, which means people are going to have to wait till 10 o'clock at night to plug in their electric vehicles as they switch over to EV, or charge at noon. That assumption is really not a very good assumption. So we already have issues with EWEB's ability to serve. But when you get to the Northwest Power Council, your summary of their work is less than stellar. The actual power plan, which I have and have read, calls for massive increase in generation capacity to maintain their reliability standard of a 5% chance of loss of load probability. Now, for the layman, loss of load probability means blackout. And their current estimated loss of load probability today is at 8%, beyond their standard because of the retirement of coal-fired facilities and other thermal plants. But if you go to page 51 of their resource development plan, you'll even see they are counting on increased natural gas generation to meet their peaking needs as they go through 2040. So, you know, to think that somehow or another that this massive increase in generation capacity is going to simply develop in the Northwest, then you got to go back to the actual reliability studies that look at where we are with our grid and what's projected. And even with all the assumptions they're starting to make to try and make the picture look more rosy because they're getting political pressure, not to say there's a 33% chance of blackouts by 2040 in the Pacific Northwest. They've made a whole bunch of assumptions around decreased cooling days and increased heating days and the ability to import power from the Southwest grid, et cetera, and new generation facilities to get down to 17% chance of blackouts in the future. So the idea that somehow or another the electric grid's ready for electrification and EVs is not there. And cherry picking a couple words out of these studies without actually understanding what's behind them and the massive need of new generation facilities and generation facilities that are what they call, spinnable power that can be spun up during a peak hour. That's the real critical need. Solar and wind are not spinnable power, and battery storage is not there at the grid level. So I know that's the next thing people are going to go, oh, but battery storage is going to meet that. It's not there. So just that initial assumption around the grid is just not there. Finally, I'd like to get to this Stanford study that got referenced in the report. My understanding is that got referenced at the suggestion of activists. It's a flawed study. It's as bad as the law study on timber greenhouse gas emissions. It needs to be deleted from the document. So without changing some of this information in here and understanding the real impact of electrification and including flawed studies that over predict indoor air quality issues, besides the fact that code requires ventilation for gas stoves, but doesn't require it for an electric toaster oven, which generates a whole lot of indoor air quality issues. It just doesn't make sense, not to mention the mold issues that go with mini splits and other indoor air quality issues. We're going to talk indoor air quality. Let's study indoor air quality and get a decent study. The Stanford study is junk science. It needs to be removed from the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. I see no further hands in the queue at this point. Giving it just a moment, then Commissioner Berney.
Oh, Chair, you know I couldn't resist.
I cast the bait, right?
I caught it. First, some questions, then I'll get to some of the statements that were just made. Mr. Nystrom, first, do you want to respond to any of the statements just made before I ask my questions?
No, it's okay.
Okay. Well, if I were you, I would. You mentioned a sentence or a statement that was wrong and that you were going to rewrite it. What specifically was that?
Yeah, it was the comment that Commissioner Bozievich mentioned. Northwest Natural found a typo that was a couple of words got misplaced while we were in the rush to put it together, and it slipped through the editor's cracks. There's a sentence about we're trying to discuss that the reliability of the electric grid versus the reliability of the gas grid. We were just trying to highlight that it's a challenge to maintain both of the grids, and that further investments would be necessary to ensure that, or I should say continued investments, because Northwest Natural invests a lot of funding to ensure that there aren't leaks, that their system is reliable, and that will be a continued challenge for them in the future.
So Mark, are you talking about page 2 of the Northwest Natural letter all board members received?
Yeah.
Where it says removal needed, untrue and defamatory language. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay. So that in fact will be removed. So what we see is not the plan we're approving. Exactly.
Well, yeah, and there was a couple other minor typos that they mentioned too, and those are and I don't think that it changes the substance of the plan whatsoever.
Okay. The only other issue I might have with it, which can be modified in a motion, which I would be delighted to make, Chair, when we get to that time, has to do with assumptions that today they're correct, but they might not be correct tomorrow about what's the best technology, what's the best mix, whether electrification in fact is 100% clean, all these assumptions that are made about the future. So on pages 30 and 31, I'd be very, and this relates, I think, to a letter we all received from some of the trades. I think I would be very happy with not prescribing how it's going to happen, but by absolutely firmly committing to carbon neutrality, right? To a zero carbon emission electrical, or not electrical, but utility system. So that would be me. I have found that the more prescriptive we are, the more wrong we're going to be, because there's going to be so many advances in different things, and the mix of this and that is going to change. So when I make the motion, I'm going to ask that on pages 30 and 31, we talk about carbon neutrality, and that's our commitment, because I don't know what the future is going to hold. Now, having said that, I would also like to share with the board, excuse me, that after our last conversation on this, Commissioner Bozievich sent around the 2019 the Northwest Power Council report. So I want to just share with you that that's completely out of date. There was a 2021 draft plan released. And in that plan, the council did not raise the alarm about a lack of energy that was raised in the 2019 plan. It identified that the amount of natural gas that has come online in the past 25 years has been over 7,700 megawatts of new natural gas generation in the Pacific Northwest, and that most of the future growth, according to this plan, is based on renewables with hydro balancing out when there is not wind and solar available. I would also like to just state, and I don't question the commissioner's statement, I'm just going to share my lived experience, that when we were developing the country's largest net zero plus facility, corporate campus, we, in fact, in the 3 years it was taking for that project to be built out, the technology for batteries had improved so much and the cost had decreased so much that the battery storage to store 67 days of energy in what's become one of the prime emergency evacuation facilities in Los Angeles County, the size required shrunk 90%. And in fact, in many states, batteries are getting there. Nothing's there. Renewable natural gas isn't there yet. Various technologies aren't there yet. Safe, reliable, small nuclear isn't there yet. That's not the point. We're getting there, and that's the reason why I say I think we need to be committed to carbon neutrality and not be prescriptive to how we get there. The final thing I'm going to suggest, and I'm sorry for taking up so much time, Chair. The final two things I'm going to suggest. One, you had another 3 months, and I think staff, Dan and Mark, have just diligently, based upon the methodology you shared with us, really reached out. And I have received appreciation from most of the sectors that you discussed to have that ability. And I think what you found is what any negotiator ultimately finds is that probably the best negotiation, nobody's happy. Right? Nobody gets everything that they want, but we've got to move forward. So I'm going to suggest in whatever we approve today, that the letter from the Climate Advisory Committee with its recommendations where it's not pleased, and the letter from Northwest Natural with its recommendations where it is not pleased, be included as appendices to what we approve as this climate action draft. You know, they're all draft plans. This plan moving forward, it's going to be a living document, as you have stated several times. And the reason for that is because I believe that in a democracy, oftentimes minority opinion is the most important opinion, because it doesn't allow the steamrolling of the majority. And so I think that if we include these as appendices, it respects and recognizes the value that each of those partners who will be partners with us moving forward, the county moving forward, has as far as we're concerned. Those are my main points, Chair, and thank you for allowing me the time.
Thank you, Commissioner Berney. I will be looking to you for the motion when the time comes. And I do see other hands raised in the queue. And once again, I will have a couple of questions. But one of my questions is going to be, and maybe this, as you answer the other commissioners, what does living document mean? Commissioner Berney took a stab at it. It'll change as information changes. How do we change it? How will it change? Commissioner Buck.
Great question, Chair. I'll be interested in that answer as well. I really am pleased that we took the extra time to go through the last draft and get public input. Every time we refine this, it gets better and better, and that will be the same in the future as we continue on this particular journey of trying to be active in lowering our greenhouse gas emissions. One letter, there was a sentence in a letter that came to us from Mr. Stokes from Local 701. And in there was a sentence that was particularly poignant to me. And I think Commissioner Berney touched on this specifically, which was, we don't anticipate the report can keep up with the pace of innovation and change that we're seeing, in that it was important to remain flexible. And so, you know, that makes sense. We know that innovation and technology changes will occur over time. Sometimes there's a big leap in that, and sometimes it's really gradual. But I'm supportive of the plan as long as it is open to ensuring that we have the capability of working through innovation and change as it comes our way. I do believe we need to move this forward in whatever fashion that ultimately lands today, with whatever amendments that make sense to the commissioners. But I just wanted to point that particular sentence out because that is something that has not been said in many of the other comments provided over these last few months since this has been revisited. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. And I didn't really see any questions as opposed to comments other than reiterating my question. Commissioner Trieger, Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I will echo, in particular, Commissioner Buck, appreciate her flagging that one letter. That was something to bring up. And I'll just note that when we talk about, we sort of don't know what's ahead of us, that's to the good or to the negative, right? And that's why we just need to stay responsive and flexible and doing this plan through an order, right? It's not an ordinance. And to me, part of what living document means is we keep the advisory committee live and engaged and working with it. And we've embedded now into it language of regular updates to the board about not only how implementation is going, but the impacts of that implementation and the feedback we're receiving. To my mind, we could spin forever. We could make endless adaptations and adjustments. It's like editing any project, right? And there comes a point where you have to consider it done and adopt the plan so you can begin to implement the plan, so you can learn what the impacts of that implementation are, so you can make any adjustments that you need to make later. So I also want to echo my appreciation for taking the extra time, for how thorough and robust the engagement was with many different stakeholders and incorporating their feedback. And I want to really appreciate just the countless hours spent by volunteers, by community members participating in the process, and by our staff. You'll note inside, we see Mr. Nystrom here and Mr. Hurley, but when you look inside the cover page, you'll see the long list of staff members across departments. And that's one of the strengths of this plan, I think, and therefore will be one of the most significant ways we stay accountable and make sure the plan is really practical and practicable for us as an organization, is that it is cross-departmental, that there are impacts across departments. And to that, I want to address some of the concerns that came up, and I've spoken with some folks around the equity work being more explicitly called out and fleshed out. And I think that's something that's operational more than policy. And so I do believe our staff really want and embrace the importance of addressing the impacts, the equity impacts of adopting and then implementing the plan, and that will be ongoing, and just really want to urge and encourage and ask our staff to look for any and all possibilities to cross-reference other plans within our organization that talk about health equity, environmental impact, and health outcomes in particular, because I think that cross-referencing and integration across things like our CHIP, our Community Health Improvement Plan, and other plans that are focused on equity and health outcomes will really help us make good on that, keeping this plan alive and keeping it a living document, is understanding how this work interacts and intersects with other work across the organization. So I think this is a really significant and important moment in terms of being on the right side of history as an organization and adopting a plan like this, and doing it in a way and through a process that really was respectful, was iterative, was engaging across different stakeholders, and that is not, it is a very clear direction, but is not a rigid plan, and is not but so prescriptive in certain aspects. So I am very excited and happy to adopt it as written, knowing that there will be opportunities to come back and look at it and adjust and amend as needed once we start learning more, when we're actually doing the work, which our job is to support staff by giving you the roadmap, which means we have to adopt the plan. So thank you for the work and appreciate everyone's comments. And again, want to just restate my appreciation for all the public comment this morning and all the emails and letters and phone calls. I have read everyone, whether I've directly and specifically and personally responded or not. Please be assured, anyone watching this, that I have read and taken into account all of the testimony, written, phone calls, emails, and this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trieger. And Commissioner Bozievich, before I speak, I'll go into the second round for you.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify a couple things. There's a difference between a adequacy assessment study, which the Northwest Council does, versus the resource plan. And the resource plan was recently adopted and published in March of this year, which was post the last meeting we had on this plan. And I acknowledge that. I also referenced the most recent adequacy assessment in my comments around 17% loss of load projections. Even looking at the March 22 plan, they're calling for a minimum of 750 megawatts by the end of 2027 to be developed of what they call effective power, which is that spinnable power for peak load. And they're calling for a minimum of 2,400 megawatts by 2041. That's a significant development of effective power. Now, in addition to that, they're also calling for a huge investment in green power, and I believe it's in a similar range of I'm trying to get down at 3,500 megawatts. So it's not like they're ignoring the green power side of the grid on their assessments. But what you have to understand is, with that, we're still looking at right now being in the 8.2% range for loss of load probability. And they're talking about going to 17%. And that's counting on getting this power, these additional loads and all that. So I just want to clarify that, the old plan I sent to everybody, yes, I agree. That was a dated plan that has been replaced. But you have to understand the plans that we're referencing and how they got from 33 to 17% between the 2 years of those plans was with a lot of assumptions to try and drive down that loss of load probability, because they caught so much political heat for publishing the one that had 33% in it. Which you can kind of see as we're massaging this plan around, there's political pushes from both sides, and we're choosing to edit plans based on outside influence. Organizations do that, like eWeb engineering staff in their study, I'm pretty sure had pretty heavy influence from outside. That all said, that doesn't change the fact that there's this issue about peak hour load and efficiencies, and the difference between calling for electrification, where you're going to meet that peak hour by burning natural gas somewhere else in the grid, exporting our carbon footprint at a 30% efficiency to the in-home heating content, versus burning it in your home at 90% efficiency. So that's the real question. Is it a strategy that's actually carbon reducing? And that's where I have great, there's that great question around that. And then there's this whole issue of electric grid stability that goes with it. It's a two-part issue. And when you burn natural gas in your home, 90% efficient. If you're using an electric heater and somebody's burning natural gas to meet that peak hour demand while you're in that winter peak hour heating your home, it's 30% efficient, generating 3 times the amount of carbon footprint. That's where this plan's really flawed, in considering things like that, and other issues where it's referencing, the Stanford study, which is complete junk science, at the recommendation of activists that are speaking directly with our staff, which I kind of, leads me to a whole nother question about how stuff gets included in plans. But I just really think this plan is not ready for prime time and really needs to go back and have some editing done before it comes before the board again.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Commissioner Berney, before I call on you for a motion, a couple of things that I'll state, and I'll keep it very, very brief because we are going to push up powerfully against the noon hour with a lot of work yet to do this morning. I'm going to start with a quote from Ulysses McGill from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Yes, sir, the South is going to change. Everything's going to be put on electricity and run on a paying basis. That was when they were flooding the, I think it was the Tennessee Valley at the time, was flooded for generation of electricity. You know, I love electricity. I do, man, I'll tell you what, my table saws run on it. My lathe runs on it. Our air conditioner runs on it. And we use both electricity and natural gas in our house, equal amounts kind of, more natural gas in the winter, more electricity in the summer. So it's, you know, it's a kind of a balance. And I kind of like that balance, having a choice of the two utilities, especially when the electricity goes out. You know, I mean, I love it to be able to turn on the gas fireplace and keep the house warm. Doesn't happen very often here. But without going too much into electricity versus natural gas, the document that we're looking at has a lot of omissions in it, and it's not a perfect document. We're acquiescing to that because we're calling it a living document that can and will change as, quote, let's see, carbon neutrality, innovation, and change, and to prevent the steamrolling of the majority. You know, we'll continue to work this document, and the means to do that will I hope become evident. But really, what isn't in this document are a couple of things regarding electricity. You know, electricity is not pure and safe. You know, it's not. In fact, you know, could you point out in this document where it does actually talk about how much of the nation's electrical power is generated by natural gas or other fossil fuels? Commissioner Bozievich talks about peak times, but the rest of the time, how much of the nation and thereby we are reliant on natural gas and other fossil fuels to actually generate the electricity that we're using secondhand. And not that I'm not talking against that, because as I've stated, I do love electricity, love using it. Another thing is it doesn't talk in the document about what's going to happen in the future when the Columbia River system dams are breached and we no longer have hydroelectricity in abundance in the Northwest. You know, we have the Carmen Reservoir that generates electricity for EWEB. When these dams are breached and that electricity is taken away, what's going to be the replacement for the electricity that we kind of continue to expand our use of? And, you know, we all fly over the forests. You know, I did this last week, and you see hundreds and hundreds of miles of clear cut where the electrical lines go through our forests. And I presume that they keep the vegetation down. I don't think they send crews out with machetes to keep the vegetation down. So all of the things that go into providing electricity, not much of that is mentioned as we talk about the balance between electricity and natural gas and renewable natural gas. And we don't talk about the danger posed by electrical failures in homes, you know, that potentially can cause fires. We don't talk about the electrical failures that happen when power lines go down, causing blackouts in the grid, but also causing fires, as was noted in our earlier discussion. So, you know, I mean, this is a living document, and I will be supporting the motion to pass this document, but understanding that as technology changes and as our vision of the balance of distribution of power is honed, that the document will change. So with that, Commissioner Berney, I'm going to look to you for a motion.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to do my best to attempt to make a motion that incorporates some of the things we've discussed. And I want to thank staff. I don't presume I know more than you, and I know all the work that's gone into this. I wanted to start by sharing some good news, though, and that is I wanted to give the group an example of something that is new and is happening in some communities and will eventually happen here. It's called because of this technology called software, and software managing batteries. And when there are enough batteries in an area, software can create virtual power plants where it literally collects the unused energy that is stored and can literally, you know, deploy it to where it's needed. So there are all sorts of fascinating fronts moving forward. So Chair, bear with me. I move approval of order and resolution 22-04-12-03 in the matter of approving the Climate Action Plan Phase 2 Community Greenhouse Gas Mitigation Action Plan with the following, I don't know if we call them amendment, the following amendments to what's being proposed. One, for the record, because Mr. Nystrom already identified this, that the removal of what Northwest Natural calls untrue and defamatory language on page 45 of the plan, but Mark, you were going to do that, correct? Okay. With that removed, with adjusting, number 2, there are 3 amendments here, adjusting the language on page 30 and 31 of the plan to be more about reaching carbon neutrality rather than being prescriptive about how we get there. That's number 2. And number 3, including as appendices to the plan being approved, the letters we've received from both the Climate Advisory Committee and Northwest Natural. And that's my motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Moved by Commissioner Berney. Looking for a second.
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Buck. Commissioner Berney's motion includes the text from the today's agenda and includes 3 additions, correcting this, what we'll call a Scrivener error on page 45, just in the language on 30 and 31 to stating reducing carbon neutrality, and including in the appendices 2 letters, one from Northwest Natural and the other from, it was the committee.
Climate Advisory Committee, yes.
The Climate Advisory Committee, okay. So moved and seconded by Commissioner Buck. I'll entertain discussion to the motion. I see no hands raised, then I will, barring discussion requested, I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
Nay.
Passes 4-1 with Commissioner Bozievich opposed. Thank you, Mr. Hurley. Thank you, Mr. Nystrom and Mr. Mokoraisky for the panel discussion. We'll move along then to the Board of Health meeting. At the sound of my gavel, we will be recessing the Board of County Commissioners meeting and reconvening as a joint meeting of the Board of County Commissioners and the Board of Health. Welcome to the joint meeting. Mr. Mokoraisky, today we have under the Board of Health, we have 2 items. First is adjustments to the agenda. Do we have any adjustments needed to this agenda?
We don't.
The only thing I'll state there, and there's no other place on this, Mr. Mokoraisky, is that later on in this meeting, I'm going to be asking for head nods. I'll mention it right now regarding the frequency of COVID-19 updates. Later in this meeting, I'll ask for head nods to move that to a monthly update as opposed to the bi-weekly update that we're currently receiving. So that's just a little bit of a heads up on that. Then next on the next on the agenda then is for Public Works. On Public Works, we have a discussion in the matter of the Lane County 2021 Integrated Vegetation Management Program Annual Report. And today, Ms. Mokoraisky, have Ms. Melanie O'Hara, our Natural Resource Specialist, and I believe that Mr. Hurley is probably going to be a part of this discussion as well. So, Ms. Mokoraisky, can you introduce your panel, please?
Yes, Chair, I'll turn it over to Melanie O'Hara, our Natural Resources Specialist in the Road Division, to lead you through the discussion.
Hello, Chair, Commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to share some details about our program. My name is Melanie O'Hara, and I'm the Natural Resource Specialist for the Road Maintenance Division. One of my duties is handling coordination for the Integrated Vegetation Management Program here at Lane County Public Works, focusing on invasive species control, herbicide data management, and coordination support for the Road Maintenance Division. So I'd like to just briefly kind of give you an overview of the basics of our program and our progress over the last year. Let me see if I can figure out how to share my screen. Oops. Oh, let's try this again. Sorry about this. One. Okay. All right. Can you see the presentation, the slideshow presentation? Oh, there we go. Let's try that. Okay. All right. So first, I'd like to comment on the continued adverse impacts the COVID-19 pandemic has placed on our vegetation program over the past 2 years. The Road Maintenance Division staff has continued to adapt throughout this time to evolving guidelines and while facing a reprioritization of duties in order to continue to assist where county resources were needed most. During the 2020 reporting year, our integrated vegetation management program efforts regarding herbicide applications were hampered and a clear reduction in treatments were performed. During the 2021 season, staff hiring and retention issues were so prevalent that we were unable to put into motion the seasonal herbicide program. As a result, annual herbicide guardrail maintenance and noxious weed control efforts were reprioritized and no herbicide applications were made during the 2021 season. This would be our annual summary report that would show a considerable amount of data associated with each herbicide application. Next, I'd just like to provide a little program overview. With the approval and adoption of the Roadside Integrated Vegetation Management Program in 2016, Lane County Road Maintenance Division operates a limited use herbicide program in conjunction with our standard routine road maintenance efforts. We utilize an adaptive management approach to our vegetation control using various methods, including manual controls, mechanical controls, biological controls, which are the release of approved insects or pathogens that assist in population controls of specific invasive species, cultural controls, which is the use of native and preferred seed mixes that create competition and help outcompete weed invaders, and chemical controls. The herbicide component of our IVM program is the most regulated portion and deserves the most transparency regarding accessible information and our resulting management prescriptions. Program approvals required clearly defined limited uses, currently focusing on 3 roadside conditions: overgrown guardrail vegetation control, noxious weed control of state listed priority species, and the treatment of stump sprouting tree species after removal within the right of way. The herbicide component of our IVM, sorry, got myself mixed up here. The herbicide products, 3 herbicide products are annually reviewed and approved by the Public Health Advisory Committee for use by our program. They're followed specifications recommended by the Vegetation Management Task Force. Those recommendations are now outlined in Chapter 15.5 of the Lane Code. Each product was chosen with a specific target species in mind. Our approved products are Vaseline, which we use to combat woody and herbaceous species such as home-laying blackberries found behind overgrown guardrails. Milestone, which is a broadleaf herbicide to combat the knapweed complex of species. And Ecomazepure 2SL, which has a broader target array, but we use it mainly to combat the various knotweed species. At this time, we see no need for any new products to be approved. I want to talk a bit about our target areas for treatments and provide some examples of what could be considered our biggest vegetation control issue: overgrown guardrails. They present a hazard to both our work crews and the public as well. Not only can they become a visibility hazard on curves and corners, but as vegetation encroaches into the roadway, pedestrians and bicyclists are forced further into the lanes of traffic, which then presents additional safety issues on our roadways. If we think about how often guardrails are placed where road hazards already exist, steep embankments and dangerous curves, we can better understand how mechanical maintenance behind rails can become a safety issue for our county employees. Another focus of our IVM program is noxious weed control. Here we have 2 examples of some Lane County priority weed species targeted for herbicide control efforts: Japanese knotweed on the left and puncture vine on the right. Both species present their own challenges. Knotweed is very persistent, resprouting from the tiniest fragments, and can damage pavement with its excessive growth, and our mowers tend to assist in its spread. Puncture vine can harm pedestrians and their dogs with spiny seed heads that embed in shoes and feet and pop bicycle tires. Lane County looks to foster and maintain partnerships to assist in targeting noxious weed species and in determining priority location for herbicide control efforts. In the past, we've worked with watershed councils to assist control efforts that combat species within a watershed by facilitating herbicide applications within the right-of-way. Our program is also developing plans to focus control efforts on priority species on roadways adjacent to or leading into county, city, and federal natural areas to assist in stemming the spread. We're also looking to develop outreach programs with private owners private landowners. As some of our species, we could make headway within the right-of-way, but the constant reintroduction of seed sources from private properties makes it a futile effort. Unfortunately, over the past year, these outreach endeavors have continued to be directly hampered by COVID pandemic issues. We expect most treatment efforts to occur over several years before seeing marked improvements, and we've actually had great results on a knotweed patch out on the Northwest Expressway over just 2 seasons. This was a very expansive patch of Japanese knotweed, and this photo was taken back in the fall of 2018. Here we have a great example of adaptive management at work looking for the best solutions for control responses. We found that if we cut back knotweed, typically by June, it allows enough time for regrowth that we can make a fall herbicide application and see decent control results. Otherwise, by fall, these plants reach 10+ feet and adequate coverage with an herbicide is difficult and not constant. Fall applications for this species assists in getting the active ingredient down into the root system through the translocation of energy resources, getting ready for winter. This is the same site in the summer of 2020. After 2 applications made in 2018 and 2019, we saw almost no regrowth in 2020 and used a hack and squirt method of application to individual canes that resprouted. We chose to make no applications in 2021 to the season at this site. There were just a couple of canes that came up, and we'll continue to monitor this site again and decide what needs to be done come next summer, or this summer actually. Our last scenario for treatments are the numerous tree species that grow within our rights-of-way. These are considered stump sprouting tree species and have been pretty limited in applications. We're still developing some protocols associated with tracking these, as it's a little more difficult, and then a way to track the herbicide component as well. Our program took to heart the recommendations of the Vegetation Task Force and has incorporated safeguards for public health and safety. We provide 7-day advance notice to our applications with signs out on the impacted roadways, as well as postings on our webpage. My contact information is provided, and I'm available to answer questions and listen to concerns. As well, biodegradable signs stating the date and product used for an application are posted at each application site. We also continue to incorporate public accessibility and input into our program. Our No Spray Area program provides the public with a voice, allowing them to opt out of herbicide applications that may occur within our right-of-way directly adjacent to their parcel. This program renews every 3 years. Our applicators have mobile tablets with access to program data that allows them to incorporate necessary components in real time. On this slide, green lines represent guardrails that receive no herbicide application because they are adjacent to the red parcels, which represent No Spray Area program participants. The yellow lines represent guardrails, which did receive an herbicide application and notates their overall vegetation condition. This yellow falls into the medium category, which is typically non-native vegetation encroaching within 4 to 5 feet of the rail. And those classified as high, which are not shown on this map, show as a red line. And those we consider vegetation that is overtaking the guardrail itself. Our IBM webpage, the public can gain access to all of the components of our program. There's a current year dashboard, which has a map providing up-to-date treatment locations, no spray area enrollments, and guardrail and noxious weed locations across the county. We provide links to dashboards that provide previous year summaries and treatment locations, monthly spray report summaries, and include access to the annual reports and approved products list. The webpage is still a work in progress, but we hope to create a resource for the public, not only for our program, but to provide valuable information on things like our best management practices and include fact sheets for noxious weed species. Part of the task force recommendations included noxious weed surveys be performed along county road rights-of-ways every 3 years based on priority weed densities to assist in expanding our county noxious weed database for support of future management decisions. The first surveys were performed in 2019, according to the code expectations. This 2022 season was our next scheduled survey, but due to the staff hiring and retention issues we have been facing across our division, we've opted to postpone these surveys until next spring or summer of 2023. This screenshot is of the public dashboard and the types of information that they can find when they come to take a look. As always, mechanical and manual vegetation control is the county's primary focus for our roadsides. Our herbicide component really affects a tiny proportion of our 1,400 miles of county roads. We have no plans for any herbicide product changes or requests for additional products this year. And the past 2 years will definitely show as a departure from our anticipated path forward for the program in regards to treatment numbers, but it's still important to remember that not all survey rails receive an herbicide application. In past years, we've made applications on about 20% of our total guardrails. We do anticipate that these early years of the program will have higher occurrences or instances with a need for herbicide applications before we could begin to see a decrease in application rates. We do continue to focus on ways that we can improve all the components of our program. We're always looking for ways to broaden our knowledge base, and we continue keeping up with current applicator license requirements. We continue to value public feedback and their concerns in order to make potential adjustments to our program components. We've changed timing of applications in order to increase protections for pollinators, and I do welcome those constructive conversations. We're currently looking into replicating some components of ODOT's Adopt a Road program that focuses on noxious weed control by the public, where we could maybe allow constituents to assist in noxious weed maintenance in order to avoid herbicide applications. In closing, our program is always looking for opportunities for partnerships and outreach or educational endeavors in noxious weed management. These assist in our prioritization of control efforts and typically end with mutually beneficial outcomes. We intend to continue to present accessible and accurate information in the hopes of providing insight into our vegetation management processes from planning and implementation stages through monitoring and review. I thank you all for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And Chair Farr, this last slide is for you. You had hoped to see some photos. So this is just, a very small sampling of all of the road maintenance efforts our guys are out there every day performing. Thank you.
Chair, you're muted.
I was singing, sorry. That was the highlight of my day so far, those photographs. And thank you, Ms. O'Hara, for the great presentation. I've had a chance to be on one of those crews a number of times, resurfacing roads. And I've heard from the people who are actually laying the asphalt. They pointed out the degradation of the edges of the surface of the pavement due to noxious weeds, and supporting the program that you're outlining, Ms. O'Hara. With that to the board, I'll say this, we're about 20 till 12 right now. We have more business to attend to before the noon break. I'm going to probably ask that we extend about 20 minutes into the noon break. Let me know if there's any issue with that. Without objection, plan on staying about 20 minutes past noon in order to conclude business this morning. And we'll move forward with the discussion in the Board of Health and Board of County Commissioners joint meeting. Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to quickly say thank you, Melanie, for the report and all the good work that's gone into this program. One of the reasons why we got back into this integrated vegetation management matrix that we did was because the county was actually the one spreading the noxious weeds onto private property, not the other way around. Our mowing of knapweed, which happens to, once mowed, bloom at mower height and then seed at mower height. Yes. You could actually trace the spread of knapweed along county right-of-ways and then into farmers' hay fields, and knapweed will destroy the value of hay.
Absolutely.
So it was really that particular noxious weed that generated the petitions and the rebirth of this program, because we knew that we just could not control that noxious weed by mechanical methods at all. And there had to be some use of herbicides, very limited. And I just really want to appreciate the Public Health Advisory Committee and their work in improving the chemicals we use. But this is such a limited utilization, and I think they do road maintenance, and you do a great job of managing the program and minimizing our chemical footprint out there, while protecting our very vital agricultural community in Lane County, which is such a huge contributor to our economy. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. I see no further hands raised. I'm still looking to the queue. Then we have before us, this is just a discussion. There is no action that needs to be taken, Ms. O'Hara. This concludes this item unless you have further information to give to us.
Nope, thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Before we conclude the Board of Health meeting, this is not emergency business, but I see that Ms. Gray has popped up on the screen, our Director of our Health and Human Services Department. Ms. Gray, can I turn the mic over to you for comments?
Oh, I don't have any comments on this particular item, but thank you.
Thank you. You may have heard that I'm going to be asking regarding COVID updates later on in this meeting. I'll be asking for head nods to change the frequency of those. Very good. Then do I see any further business for the Board of Health, Board of County Commissioners joint meeting? I see none. At the sound of my gavel, I'm thinking about Public Works. At the sound of my gavel, which is an egg, by the way, we'll conclude the joint meeting of the Board of Health and Board of County Commissioners and reconvene the meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. Welcome back. Then we are, moving into item 7, human resource. And we have before us order 22-4-12-02 in the matter of approving a market adjustment for the county administrator. And Ms. Mokrowski, I'm not going to call on you to introduce Ms. Holmes. I will do it personally. Our Director of Human Resource, Ms. Alana Holmes.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. Good morning. The board is being asked to approve a compensation adjustment for the county administrator for market competitiveness. Steve Mokrowski was hired May 5th, 2014, and Section 2.1 of his current contract states in part, the administrator's salary will be reviewed annually by the Lane County Human Resources Department for market competitiveness with our 5 county comparators. In accordance with Mr. Mokrowski's employment agreement, HR has conducted a market review. Overall, the county administrator's total compensation is 4.5% below the average market. This market adjustment is also in alignment with the county's strategic priority of our people and partnerships, so that Lane County provides a safe, healthy, and inclusive work environment that attracts and retains a diverse and highly skilled workforce. Your options are to approve the recommendation in the board order or reject the recommendation. In keeping with the market adjustments similar to represented and non-represented positions, HR recommends approving a compensation adjustment for the county administrator salary range by 5%. As is our practice, the incumbent will be placed on the closest step that does not result in a pay decrease retroactive to the first full pay period following July 1st, 2021. I'm trying to keep things brief. I'm happy to answer questions. At this time, I will turn this back over to you, Chair, for any questions and comments that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you for the brief and the concise presentation. I noticed under the therefore is it consistent also with our collective bargaining agreements. The incumbent will be placed at the closest step that does not result in a pay decrease, retroactive to the first full pay period beginning July 1 of 2021. So with that, I'll look to the queue for any discussion or comments regarding what will be a motion before us. I have it popped up and then it popped away. So I just have Commissioner Bozievich.
If Commissioner Trieger was still wanting to get in queue, she was up there before me.
Thank you. I was just prepared to make a motion. I didn't realize there was discussion.
Yeah.
I will look at the motion, Vice Chair. Commissioner Bozievich.
I do have a question. You kind of gave us an either or, all or nothing sort of scenario. But as we have looked as a board in our contract negotiations with our collective bargaining units and adjusting, making market adjustments to non-reps as being within 5% plus or minus as being within as a competitive range. So my question is, can we amend this increase to be something less than 5%? I'm a little bit uncomfortable going all the way to 5% and putting them actually above market slightly. I'd be more comfortable with something lower. Understanding that our county, although this year's budget due to federal monies is looking okay, but I'm looking 3 years out, even though I won't be here. I don't believe this county is financially stable. We are not structurally balancing our budget the last couple of years. And I don't believe that we really have the capacity to pay above market. Just being competitive and being within market is satisfactory to me. That said, knowing that we have the best county administrator in the country, probably. So I'm trying to balance in my mind equity with how we treat all other employees at Lane County, which says plus or minus 5% competitive, and how we're treating our county administrator. And I'm having a little bit of difficulty supporting the full 5%. I'd be a yes at something a little bit at some percentage, maybe lower. And I just kind of wonder if I'm the only one on the board that's there, or if that's, you know, a question other people have. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. I'll continue with the queue before I call on you, Vice Chair Trieger, and we'll state that bearing in mind under therefore is number 2, placed at the closest step that does not result in pay increase. I'd like to know what percentage increase that actually would be, because I do believe it's going to be less than the 5% inherently built into the motion. Commissioner Berney.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Holmes, when was my understanding is that the county executive has been deferring an annual review and subsequent pay adjustments. Is that correct or not for a while?
Chair Farr, Commissioner Berney, when I look at a review of his pay changes for the last several years, his adjustments, for example, in 2019, he received a COLA and then a merit. And since then, only the COLAs that align with those in accordance with his contract. There have been no market adjustments for several years. And we have not, especially through the last couple of years and all that the county has gone through, done those reviews, and they have been deferred.
That's my understanding. And I don't quibble with Commissioner Bozievich. We arguably have the best county executive in the country. He's in charge of the organization of county executives in the country. My business experience usually is you pay good people a little more to keep them. And I think it's been the, you know, I don't want to talk about executive sessions, but I think it's been the intent of this body, not just to get all of our people at that plus or minus 5, but get them as close to right at that 0 figure as possible. And that's what I hear this proposal embracing, unless I'm mistaken. But thank you very much. That's all I had.
Thank you, Commissioner Berney. I'll take that as a personal compliment, because I was the chair of the board when Mr. Mokrahewski was offered the job. And when he accepted the job, he accepted it to me as chair of the board. So I'll take that as a personal. No, I'm kidding. I don't.
No, I would like the public to hear what you take as a no. My compliments, sir. I was not.
Thank you. I'm going to take that one to the bank. Thank you. Then we'll move along with Commissioner Buck before I call on you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I want to concur with one of the statements there that Commissioner Berney made. we have been pretty diligent in this last year of going through contracts and ensuring that people are at market rate. And we have had that plus or minus 5%. I've been fairly vocal that I liked people to be at market rate and not under market rate, because we are still competitive with other counties and even private jobs in our region and around the state. So for me, I feel very strongly that I want all of our folks, including our administrator, to be at market rate. And if this is what the analysis has shown, then I will be supportive. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Then brief statement that regarding Mr. Mokrycki, I'm gonna vote in favor of the motion should it be made, but I will state that well, I'll say to the motion. Vice Chair Trieger, are you ready?
I am. Thank you, Chair. I move approval of Order 22-04-12-02 in the matter of approving a market adjustment for County Administrator.
I'll second.
Moved by Vice Chair Trieger and seconded by Commissioner Buck. I'll speak ever so brief. Oh, Commissioner Bozievich to the motion.
Thank you, Chair. I was briefly going to state that I appreciate some of the discussion. One of the reasons why our county administrator has only gotten COLAs is he's at the top step of his scale. The market adjustments we're talking about are to this pay scale, not to his salary. Yes, he'll only move a few percentage points because he moves to the nearest step. If it's not the top step again, it won't be 5%. But that, what we're talking about is a pay scale adjustment, which is exactly what we talk about with non-reps and represented employees, is whether their pay scale, the mid-range, or their lower, upper, and mid-range of their pay scale is competitive. Because if the lower is out of range, then we have trouble, recruiting people. If the upper end is out of range, we have trouble holding on to people. And that's why we look at those things. That said, I will reluctantly vote in favor of this only because of my opinion of Mr. Mokrycki's performance. But I would have been much happier with a 4%, which would have put us just under market pay scale wise, than going 5% just over, and still been well within our 5% range. In fact, within 1% of our range. I just worry that going to 5% is sending a signal to all the rest of our staff that we are going to reach, above market in setting pay scales in the future, and gives them a good argument for, well, why aren't you going to, you went above market for the administrator in your most, your most visible employee negotiations. So that's my only concern. But I'm not going to be the one that votes against keeping our administrator competitive at this point. I'm just a little bit uncomfortable with how far we're going.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. And just one thing that I'll say before I call for the vote, and that is that when Mr. Mokrycki leaves Lane County, if and when, he won't be going to Clackamas County or Deschutes County. Mr. Mokrycki will be going someplace that's a very different kind of market, very different than the market whose pay scales we're considering when we look at Mr. Mokrycki's compensation. So with that, we have before us order number 2204-12-02. Seeing no further discussion, I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Mr. Mokrycki, pay scale has been approved. We'll move directly along then to County Council announcements. And once again, Board, we're about 6 minutes before the noon hour, and I've asked if you would indulge in working through about 20 past 12 today, should the need arise. Mr. Dingell, any announcements?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Dingle asked, he had a family emergency that he needed to attend to, and he asked that I just share with you that he did not have any announcements for today.
Perfect, Mr. Morgreisi. Then we'll move on to 9A, which is your announcements. Now, I wonder if we could wrap your announcements into the afternoon agenda.
Happy to do
right now. And I'll put them in, lump them in basically along with item 14, which is commissioner's business. I'll include the administration announcements under that when we get to that point, which allows us to move directly into item 9B, which is order 22-04-12-04 in the matter of adopting refinements to the community benefits building program for capital building construction projects. And Mr. Morgreisi, you have a good panel once again assembled, which is going to include both Sean Waite and Clay Stillwell. Mr. Morgreisi.
Thank you, Chair. And you're well aware of Ms. Waite's, in particular, leadership on this issue. So I'll turn it over to Sean and to Clay to walk through this item.
Thank you, Steve. Chair Farr, commissioners. Again, my name is Sean Waite, and I'm the Facilities and Capital Planning Manager for Lane County. Clay Stillwell is the Lane County Procurement Manager, and we're here today to provide the board with the implementation update of the Community Benefits Bidding Program and ask for directions on the next step. Next slide. The 2018 and 2021 Lane County Strategic Plan identified a community benefits framework for capital building construction projects. The key initiatives of this program included promoting careers through approved BOLI apprenticeship programs, which was allowing people to receive on-the-job training in the trades while working on county projects, and ensuring employability in the industry after working on county projects. Also promoting full family health care for employees and their families, resulting in a healthier community as families are addressing health concerns without fear of high medical bills, and then also providing a living wage. Next slide. In October of 2020, the board adopted a community benefits bidding program that required contractors and first-tier subcontractors to pay a living wage, provide full family health insurance with no cost share, and to participate in an Oregon BOLI approved apprenticeship program. The first project that staff applied the program to was a renovation of the parole and probation building. And in November of 2020, the capital improvements team advertised the requirement for general contractors and first-tier subcontractors to pre-qualify if they planned on submitting a bid for the renovation of the parole and probation building. We received 30 applications from various general contractors and trades that were subsequently verified and approved. Concluding the contract award, a quarterly verification of compliance was performed, in which contractors provided certified payroll documents. Staff went onto the BOLI website to ensure that they had an active, approved BOLI apprenticeship program, and staff also received the benefits page of the insurance coverage. Staff has rolled this program out to 3 other projects, and contractors have assisted in streamlining the verification of compliance process. Everything is now electronic format. It takes no more than 30 minutes, depending on the size of the project, for staff to complete and verify compliance. Next slide. As I stated, we have applied this program to the renovation of the parole and probation building and also 3 other projects. We have applied it to the developmental disabilities project, the Harris Hall HVAC project, and also the navigation center. One of the concerns that we heard is that there may be a potential cost increase for implementing this program on our projects. I'd like to share where we are recognizing our costs as far as the bid process. So the architects during the design phase provide cost estimates of what they believe the project is going to cost. We look at the parole and probation building. The architect provided a cost estimate of approximately 5.8 million. The base bid came in at just over 5 million. The developmental disabilities construction cost estimate was just over 11 million, and the base bid was just over 10 million. Next slide. The Harris Hall HVAC cost estimate was just over 1.5 million, and the base bid was just over $1 million. And the Navigation Center was just over 3.7 million, but the base bid was just over 3.5 million. As you can see, the project cost estimates have come in much higher than the actual base bids. I know that there will be questions possibly about, well, as you go through the project, were there change orders that increase the cost of the contract? We did have change orders, but nothing that was couldn't be explained. Like, for example, when we were working on the Harris Hall HVAC system, we ran into asbestos. That was an unforeseen cost. It increased the cost of the project about $100,000. That would have been there, that cost would have been there regardless of whether this program had been implemented or not. Next slide. So we are truly seeing a culture shift in our community. BOLI stated that applications for apprenticeship programs in Lane County increased by 200% in November of 2020. For the first time, employees working on Lane County projects are receiving healthcare coverage. I have engaged with both union and non-union contractors to assist in qualifying for the program, answering questions. We currently have 63 pre-qualified general contractors and trades, which over 1/3 of those are non-union contractors. We are continuing to partner with entities throughout Oregon. We have been working with 4J, with Lane Community College, Deschutes County, City of Bend, and ODOT, and assisting them in implementing this type of program on their capital construction projects as well. Next slide. So next steps, staff would like the board to consider lowering the threshold to $500,000. Right now it is for projects $1 million and above. We would also like to identify some diversity goals, and I will turn this over to Clay Stillwell to explain what those goals are.
Thanks, Sean, and good afternoon, commissioners. So in order to inform and establish program elements tied to diversity and equity goals that serve the community benefits bidding program, we need a reliable source for data so that we can better understand who's available for us to contract with and some more specific information about who we're currently contracting with. So this data is a minimum requirement for things like a set-aside program or to monitor the success or areas for improvement for any program elements we implement later on. Currently, the only data we have access to is from a state certification body called COBID. But the issue with the COBID data is it's very weak in Lane County. It's incomplete. It doesn't give us a good, reliable picture of the contractor marketplace. So we're currently researching other best practices, particularly within other agencies in the state of Oregon and how they supplement data so that we can maybe scale some of those tools to Lane County so that we can better understand the marketplace moving forward. I'll add additionally and lastly that as we move forward, implementing diversity and equity program elements, it will be essential that we engage the community for feedback so that we can inform our program elements and right size them to the community that we serve. With that, I'll turn it back over to Sean. Thank you.
Thank you, Clay. Additionally, staff would also like to establish a disqualification criteria in cases where we run into a situation in which a contractor is not in compliance. While this has not occurred on any of our projects, we would like to have a process in place just in case. And additionally, we would like to seek ways to incorporate some climate related criteria to the program as well. Next slide. So that concludes our presentation.
Thank you for a great presentation, Ms. Wade. Then I'm going to look to the queue, and I'm Mr. Stillwell, also thank you. I beg your pardon. I'll look to the queue for any questions or comments, beginning with Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'm going to put a phrase out there because I know it's going to come up. This is not a race to the bottom if I object to this program, because our specifications will address performance and final product. We still get the same thing with or without the program. Second, cost estimates versus actual cost of bids. We did not bid an alternative without the community benefits requirements. We don't know how much this is costing us. The fact that a bid came in under the estimate just means the architect or engineer that performed the estimate overestimated to what the current market is. That's it. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that we're not paying any additional premium for the community benefits bidding process. That said, we are requiring additional things on contractors as part of this process, similar above and beyond prevailing wage, which, by the way, is what prevents the race to the bottom, because everybody's got to pay prevailing wage on these public works projects anyway, whether they're from a local contractor or from somebody from Salem or Portland. So, what we're talking about is adding additional requirements, which automatically is going to add costs. Requiring certain amount of health insurance, requiring various apprenticeship programs, they cost money. They're not free. They're built into our bids, which means we are taking our local taxpayer dollars on these projects and spending extra money for this particular bidding process. And the objective of this bidding process supposedly is to make sure we're spending our money locally. The problem with that is it leads to the balkanization of our economy. And once upon a time in the medieval times, we used to have economies that were based on a 20-mile radius, because that's how far a horse could travel in a single day. And we didn't have refrigeration. And if we want to go back to that sort of economy, we should keep expanding this program. I am a no vote on this, particularly when we start getting to set-asides, because, I'm not a biologist, and I'm not going to be able to determine whether a woman-owned business is really owned by a woman.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. Commissioner Burney.
I'm trying to get over that last one. Okay. First of all, Sean and Clay, I cannot help but just be so proud of the work that you're doing and the meticulous way in which you're approaching it. There's a phrase, and that phrase is "a rising tide lifts all boats." And I think that this is so illustrative of that phrase. As far as I've always said that the components of this agreement actually do identify, you might identify others, but they do identify environmental criteria. They talk about the highest levels of energy efficiency that can be penciled. They talk about incorporating renewable energy. I know you've been doing that into these projects. Just as a quick aside, we're not talking about anything close to the balkanization of an economy. We're talking about reinvesting locally as much as we can pragmatically, and prioritizing local businesses that provide local jobs to local residents. And when I heard your presentation and you discussed the other groups now, that because of the work that Lane County is doing is emulating our efforts, it just brings joy to me. It really does, to think that our good work here is also impacting other areas. It's very powerful data that you present. I also know that whether union or non-union is not the issue. To work with, I know that the county would be discriminating, right? If it talked about recruiting minority and people and women and veterans, because we can't do that. But some of our partners can, in fact, help the county achieve some of its diversity goals. And this is a very pragmatic way to do that. So really kudos. As far as I can see, you're talking about one thing that this does would be lower based upon your empirical data, the threshold, right, of utilizing this protocol from projects of over $1 million to projects of over $500,000.
Correct.
So totally supportive of that. I did want to ask, and this has come up from a number of local contractors. They've asked me, and I don't have an answer for this. For those contractors, especially during COVID, that are not yet BOLI approved, but do have apprenticeship programs that mimic the requirements of BOLI, is there some time period or is there some ability for them to on-ramp, you know what I'm saying, within this context, so that they're not excluded from bidding, they're not excluded from working, but you know, whether it's 6 months or a year, they have an on-ramp requirement for becoming approved, but we don't, I mean, do we have that, or is that possible?
Yeah, Chair Farr, Commissioner Berney, commissioners, we do have that in place. So when I do the verification process and do the certification for the participation in the BOLI approved apprenticeship program, we actually have several of the smaller contractors. There's 9 of them right now that are small. They have 5 to 8 employees. So they're asking for some time to ramp up the apprenticeship program. So I have pre-qualified them with the understanding that they are working towards that direction. And if they are awarded a contract, then they're going to be required to start the application process with BOLI and then be approved within 6 months of that. Most of our larger projects take that amount of time anyway. So as long as they have some sort of apprenticeship on the project, which I can verify through certified payroll, and they are working through the BOLI approved process, we do provide that exception.
Or question last, or how about if they have not yet even started the process with BOLI, but they have an apprenticeship program, and okay, that you can accommodate that also?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Berney. I see no further hands raised in the queue, so I'm ready for a motion.
Commissioner Buck's hand is raised, Chair.
Oops, you're right, it is. I scroll up and I'll find it. Commissioner Buck.
This could have been before or after a motion. I just want to say I'm thrilled to see that apprenticeships are up 200%. And if we're a part of that increase, that's wonderful. I mean, that's getting people to work on local projects. And I'm just thrilled to see that particular data point. I'm supportive of this, of course, and very interested in seeing how, this first step, grows into more of those wonderful statistics coming back into our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will look for a motion.
Chair.
Commissioner Berney.
It absolutely delights me. Having conceived of something called a community benefits protocol, it absolutely delights me to move, hold on a sec, move approval order 22-04-12-04 in the matter of adopting refinements to the community benefits bidding program for capital building construction projects. And a caveat, I'm delighted that we will have an on-ramp for those that don't have approved BOLI programs yet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Berney, seconded by Commissioner Buck. We have order 22-04-12-04 in the matter of adopting refinements for the community benefits program. Discussion to the motion. I see no discussion. I'm just going to say this really quickly. Back in 1972, I worked for Tillamook Asphalt Pavers in the summer as my summer job before I came to the University of Oregon. And I was working for $2.75 an hour. It was great. because it was well above minimum wage at the time. And I was a driver a little bit, a raker a little bit. And we did mostly driveways, but we got a job that was repaving the highway from Hebo up down Hebo Air Force Station. And it was a federal job. And because it was a federal job, we were paid what was considered at the time prevailing wage. So I jumped from $2.75 an hour for the 3 weeks I did that job. I was making like $14 an hour. For a 17-year-old, that felt like a lot of money. But I believe that was a precursor to the type of work that we're doing, ensuring that the people who are working for Lane County projects are paid wages according to what we ask people to pay. For instance, when they come into our enterprise zones, for instance. So that being said, I see no further discussion. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Passes 4-1 with Commissioner Bozievich in opposition. Then we'll preclude, Ms. Jones, we have no need for executive session today, I believe.
Pardon me, Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Oh.
I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if you were going to call for other business. I know we're a little over, but if you would, please, I have a very brief item before we adjourn for the lunch break. Thank you.
Okay, then we have no executive session today. I will we'll briefly go into other business. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I really gave this some thought over these last few minutes, but I cannot let the aside comment that Commissioner Bozievich made go without notice. He made a comment about woman-owned businesses and not being a biologist, and I can't not point out that is an ignorant, an offensive, and an inappropriate and unnecessary comment to have made. Woman-owned businesses are determined and verified by a third party, typically a state or a federal agency. And his comment to anyone who's watching this meeting who is or loves someone who is trans, and that means everyone because we all know someone, whether we know it or not, was a deeply offensive and unnecessary comment. And I just cannot let it stand when my colleague is insisting on throwing such asides in a public meeting. It's really quite unnecessary and unbecoming.
Then we'll post Commissioner Bozievich.
Can I address that comment?
Yes, Commissioner Bozievich.
So Vice Chair Trieger, I made that comment in reference to the fact that we are starting to divide our country in so many ways. And it was a side reference to testimony of somebody that you just recently
I'm well aware of the reference, sir. I'm well aware.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
so the reference is an honest one, which is it's getting to be where we're making set-asides for every little minority piece of our population. That's what I was objecting to. And the reference was to the set-asides. My wife is a woman-owned business. And I understand there is a qualification process, but we are blurring that line in a lot of ways to the point where we had a nominee for the Supreme Court that wouldn't give a definition of determining when a woman was a woman. I am very close friends with Commissioner Hall and have supported her through her transition. So, this has nothing to do with trans. It has everything to do with set-asides and continuing to divide our country and trying to give contracts out based on the artificial divisions we're making on, dividing what is one race into sub-races. We are humans. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'll tell everybody that we'll come back to other business for further comments on other subjects at the end, toward the end of this afternoon session. That brings us up to the to 12:18, and with that, we will, at the sound of my gavel, will recess the meeting of the Board of County Commissioners, and we will reconvene at 1:30. Thank you for your indulgence this morning.